The next item of business is a statement to be made by the Minister for Education and Lifelong Learning regarding an independent review into children and young people with special educational needs and/or disabilities. Minister.
Thank you, sir, and I thank the Assembly for the time today in order that I make this statement addressing the findings of the independent SEND review conducted earlier this year. This review marks a pivotal moment in our journey towards a more inclusive, equitable and responsive education system for all children and young people in Jersey. Between January and June 2025 this year, a team of independent experts visited 20 schools, spoke with leaders, staff, parents and pupils, and examined our systems, policies and practices. Their work was thorough, thoughtful and deeply respectful of the efforts already underway across our island. Let me begin by acknowledging the many areas of strengths highlighted in the review. Across Jersey, we see passionate educators, committed support staff and creative school leaders working tirelessly to meet the needs of children with SEND. Pupils have told us they feel supported and safe in their schools. Many parents have shared positive relationships with their schools, and we've seen promising developments in early years identification, special educational needs coordinators, SENCO networks, teaching assistant training and improvements in the use of data. These examples of good practice are not just encouraging, they are the foundation on which we build. However, this review also makes clear that we must do better. It identifies inconsistencies in leadership, strategy and communication. It highlights the need for clearer shared vision, stronger accountability and more transparent budgeting. And it reminds us that too many families still feel unheard, unsupported and forced to seek help outside the system. This is not the experience I want for families in Jersey. We accept these findings in full, and more importantly, we are acting on them. Already, we have made changes to the leadership of our inclusion services. We have seconded experienced head teachers into the department to strengthen collaboration between schools and the central team. We have appointed a transformational lead to drive improvements in our educational psychology service. But this is not about quick fixes. It's about building a responsive system, one that places children's needs at the centre of our every decision. If we want sustainable, inclusive education, we must build it with the teachers, not around them. Their voices must be heard, their roles respected, well supported, and their roles respected. Their voice, this is what comes from reading from a script, I don't usually do that. Their voice must be heard, their role respected, and their capacity strengthened. The future of inclusion in Jersey depends upon a confident, well-supported teaching workforce. That is why training, collaboration, and professional autonomy are the heart of our response. I know that there needs to improve our communication between centre, schools and families. We will work with schools and parents to co-create a new shared approach to inclusion that puts children's needs at the heart of every decision. I know that change will not happen overnight, but we are making the next steps to get there. We are moving from pockets of good practice to a system where every child in every school gets the support they need. Staff must receive the training and support they need. We will listen, really listen to the voices of professionals, parents, carers and young people. Jersey is not alone in facing these challenges. A recent cross-nation summit held here in Jersey made it very clear, but we have a unique opportunity to lead the way. With declining pupil numbers and budgetary pressures, we must be bold, creative and united in our approach, protecting funding and using it as effectively as possible. We must move away from a culture of complaint and towards a culture of partnership to ensure that every child, regardless of needs, feels supported, valued, and empowered to thrive. This review confirms what many of us already know. The solutions we need are not distant or out of reach. They already exist within our schools, our professionals, and our communities. We have skilled and committed staff, experienced leaders, and engaged parents. The challenge is not simply a lack of capacity, it is a need for clearer direction, stronger coordination and better support. And I will finish before taking questions with this. This review is a turning point, a clear, honest reflection that gives us the roadmap for real improvement. Although some good work came from the Nason Review, we must remember that moving to truly inclusive education is a continuum and will be incremental. Success will be a system where no child is left behind and no parent feels they must fight for support. We will not move forward in an atmosphere of competition or blame. We will move forward with a culture of upskilling and coordination. I want to empower our teaching profession. Finally, and I reiterate this key point, there is strong practice in Jersey schools. It must be consistent and system-wide. Thank you for listening, and I look forward to your questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister. We now move to 15 minutes of questions, and the first question is from Deputy Moore.
Thank you, sir. The Minister says this is a turning point, which is very good to hear. We all are aware that much improvement is needed in this area. But could the Minister just outline for us briefly, before we move forward, so that we can understand what have been the blockers to progress following the Nason Review, and why now we're in a position where concerted effort is needed to catch up?
Minister.
Thank you, sir. And I do thank the Deputy for the question, because that's a very good point. And I think the phrase blockers is a good phrase, because, as I've said, I think the skill is already there. A couple of things I would mention. The Nason Review did talk about a need for around £18 million, and only £6 million was allocated. And therefore, I don't think it's a coincidence that we have pockets of good practice. So, for example, the the training of teaching assistants has improved, the Senko networks have improved, but we need to improve further. The other thing is as well that the Nason Review was at a set time, 2021, straight after COVID was influential at the time and remains so. But I think we've had a changing environment as well in our schools of increased need and increasing identification. So now is the time to step and look again. It doesn't mean it throws the Nason Review away at all. It means that we build upon those processes within it. I hope that's enough. But, yeah.
Supplementary. Deputy Miles.
Thank you, sir. I'd like to thank the Minister for commissioning this report in the first place, and for finally listening and indeed hearing parents and teachers and children and young people. Nonetheless, the review makes for salutary reading, and it clearly highlights the systemic and endemic issues around special educational needs in Jersey. So my question really is, what mechanisms will be put in place by the Minister to hold leaders in his department to account for delivering the recommendations of the Nason report, this SEND review, and to ensure progress on SEND and inclusion in general?
Minister.
Thank you, sir. There's a couple of things there. The first thing, and the most important thing, is that we need an openness in our communication between schools and SIPES. I think too much in the past, schools feel that things have been done unto them by SIPES centrally and not understood why. That communication needs to be broken down, and we've started that with the secondment of head teachers directly into the department for that communication. The other accountability measure that is very important is the changes to our school review system. Within that school review system, the provision for SEND and equity in our schools is central, at the very heart of that system. That system is also not one that grades and reduces a school down to a single grade, which I've always opposed. It is one that looks for development and skilling up. And so that accountability is built into that system. Also, from SIPES itself and those head teachers that are seconded, there has to be accountability across our schools. And I think accountability comes best from collaboration, not from competition or fear of getting something wrong. It's about openness.
Supplementary.
Thank you, sir, and I thank the Minister for his answer. I've said quite often this year that the front line only works well when the back office is properly resourced and robust. How will the Minister ensure that, given the recruitment freeze and the bar on consultancy on non-frontline services, the progress that he seeks will not be affected?
Minister.
Yes, thank you, sir. And I thank the Deputy for, I really do thank the Deputy for that question. Absolutely. With a review like this, I think we need to look, I think there's an openness and transparency to it. I think across this Assembly, we would support provision within our schools for all of our children, regardless of their need. And therefore, I think it's easier for me and for anyone who's minister in this position to gain the sort of support we need for any recruitment that's there. However, I will say, I do believe that a lot of the solutions, the vast majority of those solutions, are within our grasp, within the staff that we have and the professionals that we have. There have been changes made there. I would like to see those reviewers revisit in time to give that similar constructive feedback and realistic, trusted feedback. If that costs something, I'm certain that I can make a very strong case for that need.
Deputy Catherine Curtis.
Thank you, sir. The review describes the experience of parental involvement in the inclusion agenda as lip service, and parents have approached me to share this concern, especially around the operation of records of need. And back in 2021, the Nason Review recommended that records of needs required clarification and transparency. So does the Minister have plans to meaningfully engage with parents on matters such as this?
Minister.
Yes, thank you, and I thank the Deputy for her question. I know that she knows a great deal about this through the panel as well. Yeah, absolutely. The record of need, I think the record of need process has become a process that is more about the link to funding, perhaps, than it should be about the specificity of the need of that child. And we need to make sure that parents are fully involved in the development of that record of need. And this, sir, is where the relationship between parents and professionals in the school is so important. There needs to be an air of trust across that. So the parents' knowledge of their child is taken into account and understood. The school's understanding of those needs of those child is taken into account so that everyone can come up with the best pathway forward. Whether the record of need is the right vehicle, because I know it's changing in other jurisdictions, is a very good question. But I would also like to see much earlier identification of need and much earlier addressing of those needs, because I don't think we should be waiting necessarily for documents in order to provide the need that children need that children have in our schools.
Supplementary.
Yes, please, sir. Thank the Minister for his answer. So will there be a proper consultation with parents about records of needs or any similar needs plans?
Minister.
Yes, thank you, sir. To be quite frank, that process is already happening, because the record of need process includes, as we stand here today, that requirement to involve parents. I think there's two things here. One is to ensure that that is actually happening, and then to ensure that if that can be improved, let's make those changes. But again, I think that is about, we have to move to a culture of collaboration, trust and cooperation between everybody involved, with one simple outcome, which is the best outcomes for those children. Now, at times, there may be challenging conversations that go on because of recognition of what professionals have. That's okay, but we need to have that trust built into our system, and I think that hasn't necessarily been there.
Deputy Stevenson.
Thank you, sir, and I'm pleased to follow Deputy Catherine Curtis, because my question also focuses on records of need. The report recognises weaknesses in the records of needs system, and although it says that work to improve that is underway, issues still remain with the process, the matrix and the funding. Does the Minister agree? Does the Minister accept that finding, and what does he propose to do to tackle the outstanding issues? Is the record of need system fit for purpose?
Minister.
Thank you. Yes, and I thank the Deputy for the question. One of the things I will say before I answer this is I think we need to be careful of this world of absolutes that I think we've lived in for too long. Either everything's absolutely perfect or everything's not working at all. Somewhere in the middle is where we are at the moment. The record of need has a good purpose. It identifies need, it links funding to that need specifically, and it can actually link at the higher levels of need some very significant funding to those individuals. I think the gap occurs when the record of need takes too long, or there is disputes over the record of need, or the way it's being used in schools for funding is perhaps not as effective as it could be. I actually feel that we need to look, and the discussions have already started with head teachers. There was a meeting with head teachers where this was begun, to look at our model of funding around SEN and RON in particular. Do we have base funding for all schools, first and foremost, so that you don't have to go and jump through hoops, and that's not a great phrase, but if the Deputy can accept that for this moment in time, in order to get the funding that's needed or the support that's needed. I don't think we should have to do that. I think we need to re-establish what we mean by that provision within our schools and move forward without those perhaps formal identifications so early on in the processes.
Supplementary?
Yes, please, sir. Thank you. Does the current system of records of need and matters linked to it adequately provide for and protect individuals as they transition from school to life afterwards? Does the Minister believe that records of needs, for example, should continue for longer to help bridge that gap and perhaps reduce the cliff edge that currently exists?
Yeah, thank you, sir. Yes, my simple answer is yes. And I think that, but that's a really positive way forward. A record of need, we have an issue on the island regards compulsory education. I think we need to be moving towards extending the age for compulsory education, but the provision needs to be there anyway. We have made one success. I give it a parallel success is those around care leavers who have identified up to the age of 25. I see no reason why record of needs cannot follow somebody up to the age of 25, which identifies their needs beyond formal schooling, perhaps into the workplace and beyond. And I think that type of support will help our young people be fully engaged in our society. That would also be a call to employers to say, look, you can be involved here. And I think as an island, we all need to be involved in the support of our young people with additional needs. I think it's not just one area. Yeah.
Deputy Brenoff.
Thank you, sir. I thank the Minister for commissioning the report as well and for his statement. And I acknowledge his point that much good work is underway. But the report is indeed a very salutary read, and it details a long list of failings. For example, system does not promote collaboration, poor culture, insufficient transparency, absence of coherent strategy, lack of clear leadership, extensive delays, overstretched resources, out-of-date key policies. And that's just the first of 3 areas in the summary findings relating to strategy and structure. So would the Minister identify what he regards from the list of failings, what he regards as the most serious failings?
Minister.
Thank you, sir. First of all, I'd like to say to the Deputy, I was hoping that we'd have a more inclusive language around this report. I noticed that the press reports have moved away from the word failings and moved towards a greater need or a greater working together, and that's the approach I'd like to take. But I can deal with his questions. I think it's very... I am not going to list in order of priority the recommendations from the report. I think they are all very, very important. There are some that can be worked on quicker than others. Some are already being worked on. The communication issues, the issues of addressing funding and the model of funding, the bringing in of specialists, of really experienced teachers who have worked in the areas of special needs on this island directly into the department to give advice and to actually take control, if you like, or oversee the provision of SEN across our island is a huge step forward. It's doing something we haven't done for a long, long time, which is saying we have a huge number of highly qualified professionals out there. Let's listen to them, let's get them involved in the change, and let's make that change realistic for every single teacher. So I'm not going to prioritise them. And I would say as well, and I recognise some parents may want to use that word, and that's absolutely fair enough, but I'd like to move away from the language of failure, away from the negative language around that, and look forward to say, yes, it is salutary. I absolutely accept that. But we could have ignored that. We could have not done this, and we could have just moved forward without doing anything at all. We can't dismiss that, and I have no wish to dismiss the challenges that we face.
Supplementary?
Yes, I'm sorry the Minister takes offence with that. I mean, I would say the summary of key judgments line says, overall, the current leadership organisation, systems, strategies, oversight and accountability arrangements in relation to inclusive education in Jersey are not sufficiently effective. So perhaps we'll go with not sufficiently effective. A simple question to follow up, really, which is the Minister confident, given the inability to deliver on the previous Nason review and his statement that funding wasn't sufficient to do that, is he confident he has the resources available to deliver on the statements he's made in relation to this report?
Minister.
Yes, certainly, sir. And I would say to the Deputy, this is not about me taking any personal offence. This is way more important than me being personally offended. That's absolutely fine, so it's part of the job. This is about a workforce and parents and children not being offended by the language used. That's just my point. I think we need to be more proactive. And not sufficiently effective is exactly the point. The Nason review was not totally dismissed or missed. There were good things that came from the Nason review. I want to reiterate that. Things happen. I mentioned some of them earlier in my answers. In terms of money, I agree with the Deputy. I think more money will be needed in the future. What I would say is we're in a period at the moment where we can start to really look at the structures that we need to build on with the people and the skills that we have now, so that when that argument for more money comes into the future, it is accurate, it's clear where it will be, and it's clear as to the outcomes that will be made with that. I don't think that happened before, and I think subsequently money may well have been spent that wasn't effective as we thought. So yes, I think into the future, whoever is in this role will need to ask for more support and funding. And just one other really key point, if I may, sir. And I mentioned it in my speech, as a general demographic across the island goes down, and we have got it's a terrible phrase, but we have a bulge going through our secondary schools, a large number going through. As that number flattens off, the key is to keep the funding in schools. So that won't be extra money. The money we've got there, let's spend it effectively, let's spend it in the right places without cutting that money back. And I think we can have a huge impact, even with that as a starting point.
There are 3 further members with questions. Are members content to extend time for an extra 15 minutes as permitted by standing orders? Yes. Deputy Joseph.
Thank you, sir. I thank you for that. I thank the Minister very warmly for the statement, and note, of course, it does come during ADHD Awareness Month, so quite appropriate. And coming as I do from a world of teachers like he was, he will know that these issues aren't new. They've always existed, not just labelled, and they have, of course, advantages, but huge disadvantages as well. And I wonder if the Minister would say, does he accept that inclusion must go, and I think he's already said it, but let's say it openly, must go beyond school gates, that there needs to be a better understanding of neurodiversity in all its forms, advantages and disadvantages, and particularly in relation to the discrimination law. And there needs to be meaningful rather than token adjustments, because that's vital for children's upbringing and how they end up as adults. And does he agree that inclusion is about understanding and support, not labelling and stigma? Thank you, sir.
Minister.
Thank you, sir. So the short answer is yes, yes and yes. Certainly it isn't about stigma and labelling. And this is where we have to be careful in the way that we use diagnoses, because it is not about labelling a child. In terms of what happens in our wider community, yes, and I would like to make a plea for companies and businesses and those who perhaps can provide spaces for young people who may be neurodiverse in their industries, their businesses, their companies, because you will enrich your workplace with diversity. It's a good thing to do, and you'll give opportunity and find skills that perhaps you hadn't seen before. And I think that's something very important that we have to do as a society, way beyond schools. And as for the understanding, yes, absolutely. I think island-wide we need to understand more. And it's not about labelling. It's just about understanding that people are different. We have difference in our society, and that's okay. Our schools do an incredible job to deal with the exponential growth in identification of those differences, and are trying the very best they do. What I want to do, and I hope that we can do as an assembly as well, is support schools in providing for that across our education system. Thank you, sir.
Supplementary.
If I may, I thank warmly the Minister for he clearly gets it. and that will be of real comfort to parents and children across the island, and adults as well, who have been through good and bad education. And I know just how important and fantastic the work is in some schools in his department, and they deserve our congratulations, because it is brilliant, some of it. I've seen it. May I ask, if I may, does he believe that he has a good understanding amongst his ministerial colleagues? As he rightly said, it's tone from the top. Does his ministers agree and think that they understand what these issues are really about?
Minister.
Thank you, sir. I would say, I hope so. Many ministers have children themselves. They have contact with schools and they understand the challenges that we face. And let me address that in this way. It's very nice of the Deputy to say that I get it, I understand it. I would say after 8 years of being out of education, and from the 20 years ago when I started education, the world would change there. I'm not sure I would get it as much as I used to in terms of the understanding of those situations if I went back to teaching. It would be a learning curve for me too. And I think that's what we need to appreciate. It's a learning curve for everybody, no matter how experienced you are, whether you're new to the profession, and we need to support that learning curve, both for teachers, for all the staff that work in schools, and yes, of course, across this assembly. So I think it's an iterative process to understand SCN, but it's also a very rewarding process, because there's nothing better than seeing a child that struggles at the end succeeding. I think that's one of the things that I remember most from my time in education. I would encourage people to keep sight of that.
Deputy Doublé.
Thank you, sir, and I really welcome this report. I think it's great that the Minister is following through on the work of the previous government, and also I think we should remember that it was former Senator Valois who initiated this work, and I'm just very grateful that the thread of that work is being carried through, and I hope it will also be picked up by the next government. And I wanted to ask the Minister, he mentioned being a former teacher. The Minister and myself are both former teachers, and I think what I would like to understand is there anything wider than this report, outside of this report and the recommendations, that the Minister himself, whether it's from his own experience or from the work that he's doing in the department at the moment and seeing in schools, that he would do on top of these recommendations? And it might be something that is a cultural change or something that's a wider change beyond these recommendations.
Minister.
Thank you, sir. I thank the Deputy. That's quite a question. The first part was about welcome. Yes, the thread of this. Yes, absolutely. I'm very pleased to say that we're continuous work, and it must continue into any future assemblies. Just as you know, we'll talk about the town school, which is something also has a thread through continuous councils of ministers, and I hope we can continue with that as well, because that develops one type of need. In terms of the wider actions that were taken, I think one of them is, it's a difficult one, one of them is a culture and environment for our education system as a whole. I think we need to move away from schools feeling they need to compete to prove their worth. Because they don't. What they need to do is just have really good practice and collaborate to have the best practice across those schools. That is a much more successful system. I think we've been guilty of being involved in the commoditisation of our children for too long, and I don't want to see that happen anymore. I want to see us working together collaboratively across assemblies, across different iterations of assemblies, to make sure that we're doing the right thing for our children. I will say to the Deputy, this is slightly like the question I was asked when I did a podcast last week from the wonderful students at the Rockyer School, and the podcast was about what would I tell my younger self. And I would say to the Deputy, I probably need a week to think it through, as I did at that one. So if that answer isn't good enough, then do forgive me, but I think it's about a cultural change across the piece more than anything.
Supplementary, Deputy?
Yes, please, sir. I would like the Minister to reflect on a specific point that I feel from my experience I'd like to see happen in schools and from the conversations that I have with teachers. And it's around planning time. I think it used to be called non-contact time. I'm not sure what the term is. But given the increased level of need and given what the Minister has said that I think we all agree with, that it is the expertise and competence of the teachers that is actually the biggest resource, would the Minister agree that terms and conditions for teachers need to be looked at so actually there is more flexibility within the teaching day for teachers to actually accommodate these additional needs and to make adjustments for the students that are in their care?
Minister.
Thank you, sir. And again, the simple answer is yes. I will say that in the government plan that we debate, I hope the Assembly can support the money that's put towards the terms and conditions review. The first time there's ever been real money put towards that. Is it enough? No, of course I'd like a lot more, but that can go towards making time. I think the collaboration between schools and getting schools working together more will also help with that planning in a simple, productive throw. I think something from my time, I would say that if we had one curriculum across our schools, that the planning of that curriculum and the planning of those resources could be shared widely across all of our schools, and that would also cut down on the time needed to give more time on the specific areas around special educational needs and those sorts of things. So there are other things that we can do as well. And I would say to the Deputy, I am convinced that schools are absolutely willing to make those type of changes and those type of collaborative working together, because they are seeing that need. They just need to be freed up to do it, and I don't think they have been free to do that before.
David Tellier.
Thank you, sir. The Minister, sir, said in his statement that we must move away from a culture of complaint towards a culture of partnership. Can the Minister just clarify that he's not suggesting that any parties, parents, for example, that have legitimate basis for complaints should not avail themselves of the complaints procedure, and just explain exactly what he means in that statement?
Minister.
Yeah, I thank the Deputy for the question, because yes, good point. No, absolutely not. The complaint system should be there and used where appropriately. But what I want to see is a system whereby our inclusion process, our SEM process is good enough, collaborative enough, working with parents enough that they do not need to complain, because the processes are working for them and their children. I think that's what I was getting to there. Otherwise, when that communication breaks down, we spend too much time simply talking about the complaints rather than solving the problem for the child. And at the end, I don't think a complaint system really does that much to solve a child's problems. And that's got to be the basis of everything we do. I hope that answers the Deputy's question.
Supplementary. Deputy War.
Thank you, sir. Does the Minister believe that some of the issues referenced in this report are reflected in the fact that we've seen a doubling of absenteeism at schools since 2019? What does the Minister think is necessary to get kids back into school again and to reduce those levels of absenteeism?
Minister.
Thank you, sir. I don't know if I would necessarily agree with the notion that absenteeism growing that far is isolated. I think we went through COVID. We had significant, we all know that we had significant effects of COVID when children were staying at home, going back to school. It didn't become the routine. And I think we are still paying for that now. A lot of work is going on in terms of getting children back into school and getting the right environment for children. And that's the other thing. The environments in our school have to be right. When schools are too crowded, too small, not suitably equipped to meet the needs of, particularly for those with additional needs, then there may be an increase in absenteeism. I hope, therefore, sir, that the Deputy later on will support the town school build and the Passerelle new build.
Supplementary.
I'll leave that for the later debate. Just one point which has been made to me, and there's a real danger in when we have all of this sort of need identified as what I think someone's termed inclusion tokenism. How do we make sure that we don't have inclusion tokenism, that we actually really do build the resources correctly to ensure that inclusion is properly done?
Minister.
Thank you, sir. I really don't like that term, I will say. I don't like the term because for some parents who might be listening to this, that would be not good. I think I understand the Deputy's point, but this is exactly the point about early identification. Early identification so that we don't have to go down necessarily a process of diagnoses. Because, and don't get me wrong, a diagnosis can be extremely important, sir, for getting the specific need and widening that need beyond education into health, into CAMS, etc. Have no issue with that at all. I think we just have to be careful to say that it's not about tokenism. I don't like that phrase. It's about appropriate use of terminology, appropriate identification, and appropriate support where it's needed. A child may have a particular educational need, but it may not show itself in every single circumstance. A simple example for myself is if you put me in the science lab, I was happier than anything. But as soon as you put me into an art class, and I have a lot of art teacher friends, I will say before I say anything else, I was a little out of my depth. And I think that's a simplicity. So things come out in different ways. But it's that early identification, it's the appropriateness of identification, and I think it's that trust of that and what's going on in the schools that is more important. So I would agree with that element of what the Deputy, if that's what you suggest.
Well, thank you, Minister. That completes that period of questions. Now move on to public business, and the first item was to be the draft Harbours Inshore Safety Jersey Amendment Regulations. But Minister, I understand that's to be deferred to the next meeting, is that right?
That's correct, sir.
Understanding Order 87. We now move on to the proposed use of the former Jersey gas site, request for reconsideration, lodged by the Conotab of St Helier. The main respondent is the Minister for Education and Lifelong Learning. I ask the greffier to read the proposition.
Sir, before the greffier does that, could I just state for the record that I will be withdrawing from this debate. It will certainly end up in a planning application, which I will stay well clear of.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Yes, greffier.
The states are asked to decide whether they're of opinion to request the Minister for Education and Lifelong Learning to reconsider the proposal to build a new primary school on the site immediately adjacent to the Millennium Town Park, formerly occupied by Jersey Gas, the site, and following consultation with the Council of Ministers, to present a report to the States Assembly by the end of 2025, providing A, an assessment of the need for a new town primary school in the light of demographic changes, including the capacity of the existing primary school estate to meet demand for new school places, and any alternative approaches to meeting this demand. B, data as to the number of households located within 400 metres of the site, and estimates of the numbers of potential users by age group of an expanded Millennium Town Park, including those living outside this radius, visitors, shoppers, and office workers. C, an analysis of the health and other benefits provided to the whole community by the Millennium Town Park, especially the ageing population, and an assessment of the likely impact of doubling its size compared to the current proposals to develop new pocket parks on sites such as those presently occupied by Springfield School and La Basse Centre. D, an assessment of the expected traffic impacts on the St Helier Road network of a new primary school constructed on the site, including air quality levels in surrounding streets, and an assessment of the role active travel could play in mitigating them. And E, up-to-date financial projections on the cost of building and maintaining the proposed new primary school compared with the costs of meeting the demand for new primary school places by alternative means.
Conotab of St Helier.
Thank you very much, sir. So I'm indebted to the Minister for Education and Lifelong Learning for inviting me to tour some of the town primary schools several weeks ago. And I must say that I'm sorry I didn't have that tour before I wrote my report. And I'm not criticising the Minister, he's offered me a tour on many occasions. But certainly some of the remarks in my report, particularly suggesting that the rural primary schools could in some way meet capacity for town students. I probably wouldn't have written that if I'd been around the town primaries that I visited recently. Because of course I've seen for myself the potential for meeting the demand for town primary school education within the town. Having said that, I don't think that the tour of the schools that I undertook has changed anything that I've put in my proposition, which has just been read out to members. It has 5 parts, and I've got 5 things to say. I'll try not to be too long-winded. And in fact, my 5 points don't relate directly to the 5 points in the proposition. If I can return first of all to that tour I took with a member of the Friends of the Town Park group of 4 primary schools. We started at La Passerelle, and as any member will know who's visited that particular school, special needs, it is staffed by hugely dedicated and committed teachers, with the ones I saw very happy children taking part in their classes, but in woefully inadequate premises, and it absolutely does need to be replaced. I completely concur with that. What I'm not sure about, and one of the reasons I brought the proposition, is whether the needs of a new La Passerelle can be met, or should be met, in a large town primary school near the town centre, or whether there aren't other ways of including a new La Passerelle in other town primary schools which already exist. I then went to St Luke's, and what a wonderful, wonderful school that is. The head teacher took us round, and he deserves a medal for what he's doing in that confined space. A very happy school, as I say, sir. Again, dedicated teachers working in a very cramped site. And at first blush, one might look at St Luke's and say, of course it needs replacing in the centre of town. But when you think a bit more about it, you think, well, that's quite a way to go. It's quite a way to travel for existing parents with their small charges. And members may have received some emails from parents at St Luke's, I know I have, who are aghast at the idea that they should be making that trip into the town centre with their children every day. One of the more recent emails pointed out that don't we have the beach on one side and Howard Davis Park on the other? Isn't there more that could be done to improve St Luke's and to make more use of it? I noted when I was there that part of the building has been made out of bounds due to recent health and safety regulations. And we all love those and we understand why they're necessary, but would it be possible for St Luke's to stay on site? It, after all, has a fantastic safe routes to school system, which is now in place. And I heard from one leader of the community, I won't embarrass them by saying who they were, that to move St Luke's will rip the heart out of that community. I'm not saying that it's a wrong move to do, but the point of my proposition is to say, well, shouldn't we just think again? Shouldn't we reconsider whether St Luke's is best served by moving it into the town centre? I then went to Springfield School, which I know well. I was shown the missing roof tiles in one of the classrooms, and sure, it's a bit dilapidated. It does need money spending on it, but we're not very good at that as a government, are we? We're not good at maintaining our infrastructure. I remember the plumber from St John rolling up his trousers. He used to do, he could get away with that, sir. The bailiff of the day either couldn't see his knobbly knees or he let him get away with it. But the plumber from St John was always talking about the lack of maintenance in public buildings. Absolutely right. And Springfield needs money spending on it. Having looked at their outdoor space, there's definitely room for expansion of their outdoor space. Fabulous trees. And incidentally, a nice, fairly recent pedestrian crossing that was installed by the parish and unveiled during a fairly recent broncage. So not only students and their parents can get to school more safely, but if they were to have an extended town park to benefit from, it will be a much easier task for them to walk down to the new town park. Finally, I went up to Janvrin. Janvrin was not on the list that I was offered by the department. Instead, I was offered a tour of Doverne School, which struck me as interesting because Doverne is an example of what you can do with a primary school with no space constraints. You can get everything up there, and it's a fabulous school. But I didn't want to see Devon because I know it well. I wanted to see Janvrin, where one of my children went many years ago. Again, inspirational head teacher, fantastic staff, particularly the music department, I thought was doing incredibly good work. The school itself doesn't have any disabled access, which is quite remarkable to me. I'm surprised that that hasn't been dealt with yet, but it's on a big site. And I think crucially for me, Janvrin is on an elevated site. It's above the ring road, it's above the town centre. And I was thinking to myself, surely we have got a number of sites which are elevated above the town in the escarpment. Surely there is opportunity for a new primary facility, or possibly including the passerelle, to be taken away from the traffic. And I'll come back to the traffic in a minute. I want to move now, if I may, and it's quite a move, to the proposed youth centre, just to change topic a bit. So my vision of doubling the size of the town park, and it's been in my head and my heart for a long time. I had to compromise that when it was pointed out to me that the Jersey Gas showroom is a big building, it's a relatively new building, it has a lot of potential reuse. And when I walked round it, and I've done that tour twice now, I was really struck by what a waste it would be to just knock it down, because you could put a fantastic youth centre in there. And I've been around it with some skateboarders, some other young people, and their eyes were popping out at the thought of having all this wonderful space so close to the town centre. My question really for the Minister is, have young people been consulted? Have they been asked to choose between a youth centre in the Jersey Gas showroom, the former showroom, or the new one that is being purchased at considerable cost of a developer down the other end of the park, down at the brewery site? Because it does seem to me, and again, I'm no expert on what makes a good community centre or youth centre, it does seem to me that that question should have been asked and those sums should have been done. How much would it cost to convert that site into a community centre and youth centre right in the heart of an extended town park? Moving on. Costs, I've just referred to the cost of that. And the cost of the whole proposal, I was hoping today to hear from my Minister via a question from Deputy Ward, what the whole cost of this project is. Unfortunately, we didn't get any meaningful figures. We got one figure of 15 million in the budget, which obviously is not going to pay for the new school or anything like it. And we got another figure of 16 million for the youth centre, which is about 30 million. I would guess that the total cost of this project is going to be double that. It's going to be about 60 million to get the youth centre and a new primary school built on the Jersey Gas site. So we don't have a cost, we don't have a timetable. And in some ways, that should be a relief for people who want to see the project of extending the town park go ahead. Because clearly, it's not a case of people are just about to put spades in the ground. This project that is being pursued by the government is not ready to go yet. And actually, that does buy us some time, and it buys me some comfort, because I think whatever the outcome of this debate, there's going to have to be a budget allocation for the new school and the new youth centre. There's going to have to be a planning application. And the current campaign, which is being extremely well run, I think, by the Friends of the Millennium Town Park, that's going to gather more and more force as the weeks pass and as the months pass. And so I think there will be a real question about the cost of these new facilities that are being proposed, particularly when there doesn't seem to have been any comparison done with the cost of alternatives. And at a time when, and I quote from the Chief Executive of the States, the precarious position of states' finances, at a time when we are starting to worry about budgets and taxpayers are starting to worry about states' expenditure again, is it really wise to be spending tens of millions of pounds when there may be a better and cheaper alternative? Sir, traffic has been raised by almost everyone who has written to me about the proposals. They cannot see how a 400-space primary school on an already busy ring road will be achieved without even more traffic chaos. Now, we're told that all of these students are going to walk and cycle to school. Well, I just saw a pig fly past the windows of the Assembly, so I don't know how long we've been told that people are going to walk and cycle to school, particularly primary school. It isn't going to happen. We all know that. People are going to drive their children to school, and to drive everybody there, rather than perhaps driving them to smaller schools or to improved educational facilities around the town, is going to be difficult for traffic, to say the least. And so, I suspect that people who live in the lovely new homes that are being created all around the town park are going to start to think about, would they rather have a very, very busy road outside their door, or would they rather have a bigger town park? Finally, sir, my fifth point. I wish I could summon up the shade of Frederick Law Olmsted, a name that will not be familiar perhaps to everyone, but he was the mid-19th century designer of Central Park. And in fact, he designed many parks in the United States and numerous college campuses. Without Frederick Law Olmsted, New Yorkers would probably have a number of pocket parks to enjoy. They wouldn't have a park that you can jog around and lose, well, I say lose your way. I mean, it's actually not a very safe park in some places either, but it is a fabulously big park. And I was told off recently when we were debating this matter in another shape that St Helier isn't like New York or London. I shouldn't be talking about city parks. But I beg to differ. In 100 years' time, sir, people are going to look at the northern part of St Helier if this large building development goes ahead. And they're going to wonder at the lack of vision, the lack of foresight of the Assembly that approved it. And they're going to say, why didn't they find other ways of keeping that precious piece of land, the only piece of land that can be used to extend the town park? Why didn't they find other ways of solving their school problems to enable St Helier's growing town to have the bigger town park it deserves? So that's all I'm going to say. I think the points I've made and the points in my report do make a good case for reconsideration of whether we shouldn't be having another look at this, and I urge members to support the proposition. Thank you, sir.
Minister, have you got a point of clarification, or do you want to speak?
No, I was going to speak first.
Is the proposition seconded?
Yes, sir.
Minister.
Thank you, sir, and I thank the Deputy for his speech. It's very interesting. Constable, sorry, sir. One gets confused. So I speak today in firm opposition to the proposition before us of the Constable of St Helier, and I will look at each part in turn. Part A of the proposition, which seeks to undermine successive governments' initiatives to construct a new town primary school. And so I will say that it's just quite remarkable. This is something in the Assembly which actually previous Council of Ministers, the Council of Ministers before that, the Council of Ministers before that, I think, agreed on. And that it has become something agreed on by the previous, I think, 5 education ministers. So there is a continuity here that I think is important to point out. Unfortunately, there have been obstacles put in the way throughout, and this will be another obstacle. And it is clear that this is not just about delaying this is about ending the project. But so this is an initiative that is not only necessary, but visionary in response to the future educational needs and urban development. I urge members not to be distracted by selectively cited demographic trends. Birth rates may fluctuate, and enrolment numbers may dip temporarily in isolated areas. We've been looking at demographic changes for years. We track the changes and anticipate future trends. We have presented this to head teachers, to scrutiny, to teaching unions. And there is no justification to pull the plug on a long-term investment in our infrastructure. A modern purpose-built primary school in St Helier is not about reacting to today's numbers. It's about planning for the next generation with facilities that meet evolving educational standards and community needs. There is an irony to me speaking, as I did earlier, with my statement and the questions that came about educational needs, and me talking about this subject straight away. The argument from the proposer hinges on maintaining a viability across existing schools by adjusting catchment areas. Now, it's interesting that suddenly the constable, who has been constable for a number of years, but from one visit to a school has changed his idea about bussing children out. But that will still have to happen if we let our schools collapse in the next 5 to 10 years without actually addressing the need that is there. And is that what we want for St Helier? Longer commutes, disrupted communities, and a reliance on an increasingly strained transport system. The argument over transport, which I will come to later, will not be helped by busing children out of the centre of St Helier to country schools, because that's when parents will drive. And then we'll have absolute road chaos as they drive back into town in order to park up by their homes and walk to work. It is not a sensible approach. And putting our youngest children on buses each morning at the end of the school day goes directly against the type of identification of needs and the challenges that some children may face in going to school, including increased absenteeism, which I was asked a question about earlier. So let's think this through from the beginning. I will say Trinity School, as lovely as it is, and I have visited, should not bear the weight of accommodating children from other parishes when the answer is to build where demand is. And remind members that the new school replaces 3 outdated existing schools. Without it, we'll be looking at transporting whole cohorts when the current schools become totally unfit for purpose. The proposition also claims, and the constable has claimed, that alternatives to the Jersey Sky were not truly explored. I reject that characterisation. 41 sites or properties were initially considered on a long list of potential sites. Most proved unsuitable due to size, location, or alternative use already identified and committed to. This information was presented to the Millennium Town Park Group by the previous minister, and Deputy Alves was there, in November 2023. All of the evidence that shows why this is the site was presented, but it seems to have been ignored. And the previous government presented that evidence well. I have the document here. Those sites have not, in fact, some of those sites are now totally not available because they've been built on already. There was an alternative site for the school. Deputy Coles brought a proposition in 22 to have the play.com site used by the school. That lost by 3 votes. It was a close vote. And now we're on the final stage that gives us a joined-up solution to all the issues that we have. The school is supported by the Bridging Island plan, and it reflects the reality of our town schools are struggling and our children are paying the price. Today's schools demand space, sustainability and accessibility, qualities that the Jersey Gas site has to offer and others do not. We should celebrate, not question the opportunity that's been created here. We have even had reports from one member suggesting that we make a temporary school whilst retrofitting schools that are already not meeting space standards. To put simply, that is a very, very, very bad idea. And finally on this part, I caution against nostalgia disguised as prudence. Educational policy must be guided by data, inclusivity and ambition, not anecdotal whispers and retrofitting plans. If we are serious about excellence in education, then we must be bold. Building a new town primary school is not an overreach, it's overdue. On to part B. It argues from a place of concern from demographic trends and park accessibility. It risks sacrificing critical education infrastructure on the altar of hypothetical data. That is bad decision making if we do that. Let's be clear, the proposition to gather extensive new age-related statistics before approving development is not unreasonable. But when it is wielded as a delaying tactic, it undermines progress that is both necessary and fully considered. And unfortunately, sir, the constable let the cat out of the bag when he talked about how well-run a campaign it's been, and that will grow, because that campaign is to stop the school happening. It is not about looking at it again. It is saying we are not interested in school being there regardless of all the information and the data you produce. It simply won't be there. So which is it? The constable needs to answer that. Is he really just asking to look again, or is just a recipe for ending this project? It's already been delayed by 3 years. It could have been opened this summer. We would have had that school in place. And that's why costs have gone up as much as anything else. Now, so what is equally being overlooked is the need for urban renewal as well as education renewal. There's an assumption made that senior citizens are best served by green space alone. In reality, sir, what they deserve, what all generations deserve, is thriving communities with families staying local, where grandchildren can attend school close to home, and where intergenerational interaction is a feature, not a flaw. And replacing the current Springfield sites with a considerable part will provide green space closer to many of our elderly residents. Holding one site hostage in perpetuity on the off chance we may want to expand decades from now is neither practical nor responsible. As for major developments mentioned, Margeria, Northern Quarter, Ann Street, Mayfair, these are testaments to St Helier's growth. But with that growth comes the need to balance recreational space with civic services. A new primary school is not an intrusion, it's a foundation. It offers structure, safety, and a cornerstone for family life in an increasingly dense urban zone. So we have an ongoing project with the Infrastructure Minister. I'm sure the Constable will know about this because he's an Assistant Infrastructure Minister. And that project is to open schools to community access in a safe and practical way. I was at one of our secondary schools, I won't say which, but it was on the east of the island, the other day where we were looking at opening for a community project. And quite rightly, there was a point made by the head teacher there and said, I'm happy to open my school, but you have to recognise when I open the hall, I have to open the entire school. And that's a problem because then I have to check the entire school because they weren't built with community space in mind. We have an opportunity in the centre of St Helier to build a school with that community space in mind. The green fenced off space in front of the school where our children in St Helier can play in a green space. What a remarkable idea. Our children in St Helier can play in a green space. That can be available for the community out of school areas, ours in a controlled area. I was recently in the park looking at the Festival of Words, brilliant thing going on there. The whole park was taken up by things for children to play, could have fitted into that space in a safe environment with fences around it, and the rest of the park can be used. With smart use of this community space, we can extend community use in a number of different ways. Plus, there is the plan for the 3G pitch on top of the school, and when it's built from day one, it's simple. You have two entrances, one for daytime use and one for use after school, thus increasing the facilities for that local area. A simple approach which makes a huge difference for the people there. The new school will be an opportunity to build that community access. But there are new green spaces for the community. The current Springfield site will become parkland in over 5,000 metres squared of open space in the heart of town, on the doorstep of LaCoy Estate, in the heart of the elderly communities nearby. Plus there's the development of the Bar Street site. The Gas Place site is 9,072 metres squared, Springfield 5,079 squared, plus Le Bar of 6,873 metres squared. Sorry about the numbers. That's a total of 11,952 metres squared, equals 32% greater than the Gas Place site area. So when you look at it analytically, you're getting a greater green space available next to communities. And there's more in terms of the facilities that I've talked about outside of school hours. Also schools like that, and I see First Tower quite a lot, are open all weekends. When we had the meeting at the town hall, a head teacher stood up to correct the constable, actually, who talked about schools not being open, to say that his secondary school was open from 7:30 until 9:30 at night. And I know that's true of the school in Le Kennevet, I know it's school of La Rockia. These schools are all opening to the community. They are vital community spaces. I know that happens in primary school, St Martin's School. I know these things are happening and we encourage them. That needs to be understood. So I urge members to reject Part B. Turning Part C and D of the proposition, hypothetical situations overriding urgent realities is what the note I made about that, and I think we need to really consider that. These sections take us down the path of delay and indecision, and this is a delay, and this is a delay built upon this not happening. So the idea that, let's extend this to the next election, that's absolutely fine. We stand on principle. I stood on that principle in the last election. I believe we have a really good project to revitalise that area of St Helier with a school that's needed, community space and green spaces put together. And I am quite happy to stand and defend that and explain that. So that's absolutely fine. But let's get on and do it. There are partly, of course, there are health benefits of green space. They're undisputed. But the claim that expanding Millennium Town Park via Jersey gas site would confer exponential greater benefits, it's referred to as a marriage value, lacks any objective evidence. Adjacency has functionality and aesthetic appeal, but it's not. But that's all. Creating new parks at the Springfield Bar is not hearsay; it's flexibility. And the flexibility is exactly what Jersey needs in a limited space in the centre of town. Local communities can go to local spaces. They can be built appropriately. We have the opportunity to build more of the fantastic play parks, like the one in Parade Gardens that was brought to the Parish Assembly by Deputy Feltham, actually. So there are opportunities there to make those impacts elsewhere and draw people to those parks. And in terms of traffic, we're already jumping to the planning process, which we're not ever going to get to if we delay where we are now. And the costs will go up and it will be even more difficult. Let's just state it, let's not say what it is. But this government and the Constable, via the Parish of St Helier and as Assistant Minister of Infrastructure, is already committed to enhancing active travel routes and developing safe paths for walking and cycling. And then stands up in this assembly and says, well, you're never going to get anybody walking anywhere. So which is it? What are we being sold by the Constable of St Helier, who's been Constable for a long time to actually make these changes to St Helier? So you either believe in that or you do not. And I say, sir, with proper support, infrastructure and planning, our new town primaries can be a flagship model for sustainable school transport. Many of the children who go to St Luke's or Springfield already walk to school. And it's the traffic around those areas which is the risk of them, not the traffic taking them to school. We take them away from that. Our children in St Helier might have the opportunity to walk through a park to school and then play on green space when they have their playtime. Do they not deserve that like country children do? Oh, well, I think they do. And I think that across this assembly that would actually be agreed with. And then I've already talked about busing our children out and causing the chaos of transporting hundreds of children to parish schools at different times, plus breaking up friendship groups at the end of the day and not allowing play, and that nonsensical idea that might work. So I urge members to reject parts C and D and stay on course towards this smart, inclusive future for St Helier. Now, the party, as the proposition is, I am finishing, and I thank the Assembly for giving me time because this is really important to me, and I want to I just speak once, get on with it, that's all I can do, but I will try to do that. Part C suggests that Jersey site might yield more financial benefit as parkland rather than educational infrastructure. They're not trivial questions that we've got here. They deserve some thought and responses. Building a new school is expensive. It's more expensive after the delay that we've had, and if we delay it any further, it will become even more expensive. If it would have been built by now, we would have spent the money, we'd be looking at what else we can do with the money as we move forward, because money was put aside when we changed the Bridge and Island plan. But the refurbishment, so-called refurbishment, repair of ageing schools isn't a matter of fresh paint and optimism. In the long term, it's a long-term financial drain for piecemeal fixes, accessibility compromises, as was mentioned, and diminished educational outcomes. We are spending thousands upon thousands in just keeping our schools running in inadequate buildings with no green space for our children to work. Actually, that's not true. There is a piece of green space outside Springfield School. It's about the size of the centre of this room as I walk past it every Monday when I go into the school. Because I still read with the children there. It's nothing about my political career. It's something I've been doing for about 5 or 6 years. That's why I know the way this school is structured. And we read in a corridor, by the way. There's no space to read anywhere else. We read in the corridor. And then when PE ends and they walk past, we have to stop for 5 minutes while all the children move about. Is that what we want for our children? I don't think it is. So parks have undeniable benefit from mental health, biodiversity and local aesthetics, but they are rarely economic engines. A new primary school, on the other hand, supports working families, enables parents to contribute to the economy, creates jobs and enhances the desirability of nearby housing. It anchors a community. We have global outlook is uncertain. What is certain is the cost of any more delay. And this delay, which is designed to stop all of these projects ending, is certainly ultimate in that. So I'm going to cut short some of this speech because I'm probably losing some of you here. No, parks are vital for children's play, for older islanders, for community cohesion. The romanticism of a park reminiscent to Central Park or Le Parc de Tête d'Or must not cloud our judgment. Jersey is not New York nor Lyon. I used to live by Central Park in East Ham, or as I called it, Eastham-on-Thames. It was a beautiful park, but it wasn't Central Park in New York. It may well have been just as dangerous, but that's not necessarily true. So we are a compact island with finite land and pressing needs, and one of these needs is a modern, accessible primary school in the heart of St Helier to deal with all of the issues that I talked about earlier and we've just exposed for a report that we commissioned this year. We know what we have to do and we know the facilities we need to do them in. And we are not doing that at the moment for a significant number of children in the centre of St Helier. The cost of inaction is not just financial, it's social, educational and generational. The notion that the Jersey site must be reserved exclusively for park expansion ignores the creative potential of integrated planning. The talk that I spoke about earlier. And I look at the infrastructure minister, and I know that's what he desperately wanted our schools to be to begin with, because it would be a lot easier to go through the process we're going at the moment to get those schools opened if they were. Sir, a new school and green space are not mutually exclusive. With thoughtful design, we can deliver both. A school that opens onto a park that serves as a classroom, a community hub that bridges generations. Spaces available to the local community, built in from the design stage. A genuine community space in a densely populated area of town. So the call for a fully objective and comprehensive reconsideration is euphemism for delay and cancellation. I am stunned that the Constable of St Helier will suggest that we do not build the youth facility that is so desperately needed and we're actually getting underway with. It's actually started for the first time. And there is something slightly counterintuitive about saying extend the park and leaving a whopping great big building on it. Because you're not expanding the park, you're leaving a whopping great big building on it. And I think that is an example of the complete lack of coordination of the argument here. But let's be more positive. So we have the data, we have the need, we have the opportunity. I urge the members of this Assembly that let's not squander this. I urge you to reject the final argument and support this proposition and all parts of this proposition. Let's build a future for St Helier that balances beauty with purpose and vision with action. Let's give our children and our people in St Helier the community that they need, the spaces that they need and the opportunities well into the future. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Minister. Deputy Ferry.
Thank you, sir. The Conatable in his speech raised some points about the youth centre, and I feel that as I have political responsibility for that project, I would like to respond to some of the issues that he raised. First and foremost, he asked what other sites were considered. Secondly, he asked how were children and young people engaged with. And thirdly, he asked whether planning permission has been applied for. So, of course, all of this ultimately is going to be subject to us approving the new youth centre in the budget debate in December. But to answer the questions that the Conatable raised, there were indeed 11 sites that were extensively reviewed, engaged with young people to gauge their opinion, and also working alongside sites and property holdings, we scored them against a matrix to find the ultimate winner. And the sites that were seriously considered were Lamont Street Centre, the ambulance station, JSPCA, the Labar site, the bridge, Paragon House, Gasworks showroom, Nelson Street car park, obviously the brewery site, Rouge Bouillon and Springfield. The only other site that came anywhere close to the ultimate choice was the Paragon House and Nelson Street. And of course, the one thing that we didn't want to do is upset the Honorary Police. And so that was quickly shelved, which led us onto the ultimate site of Ann Street. So, young people were extensively engaged with. Plans were put before them to gauge where they would like to see a park, a youth centre, how it could be safely accessible, what hours they would like it open. And we've got serious plans that have been worked up. Planning has been applied for and approved. And ultimately, the building, although it won't open until 2028, we will have capacity for 100 people at a time, 100 children and young people in that building. And when we consider that multiple sessions will be conducted over any one day, we could see upwards of 300 or 400 young people in that youth centre at a time when we've got over 1,050 flats being built in that immediate area. There is a pressing need to get something which is suitable and is of the right stature and class for the people in that area to make sure that we keep them engaged in productive activities and keep them off the streets, basically, and away from their digital devices for a short period of time. Ultimately, it will be subject to approval in the budget, and that will come back. But turning to the school itself on the gas site, as the Minister has already alluded to, this will be a community hub. And another piece of my work is the play strategy. And I was really encouraged to hear that any play facilities on that school site will be open and accessible to children and young people outside of school hours. Gone are the days of closing up school gates in early afternoon and not letting children and young people enjoy those facilities. It will be at the heart of our community, and it will service children and young people at weekends and at all times after school. So I equally would urge members to reject all parts of this proposition. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Deputy. Does anyone else wish to speak on this proposition? Deputy Joseph.
Thank you, sir. I will be supporting the Constable of St Helier, and I also would hope that with the benefit of some remarks that I have thought long and hard about, both in discussion with the Constable and having had the significant benefit of attending the town park debate that was held in the town hall, in the St Helier Town Hall. I am supporting the Constable of St Helier, sir, and I speak both with heart and head about the future of our town, which includes Georgetown, and the future of green spaces and our schools, and how appropriate it is that we are discussing schools after the statement from the Minister for Education as made earlier. This debate, sir, if I may say, is more than just about a line on a map or a planning policy document. More than a Bridging Island Plan decision that was actually a Bridging Island Plan for 5 years and is now expired, but still the policy. This debate is about schools, young lives. I would remind members that one of those schools, which the Constable has kindly taken in St Saviour, St Luke's School, is a school that sits at the very heart of a community. It exists, not least of which because the great late T.B. Davis was educated at St Luke's. He will have walked the corridors of a St Luke's primary school. He was put in the cellar of a house that is now in the Howard Davis Park in honour of his son. T.B. Davis vowed that he would create a park and build it, and he did. So I ask members very politely and respectfully, what would T.B. Davis say today if we were here telling him that the school that shaped him and everything that he achieved in his life was the school that inspired him, that we're going to close it and uproot it? Would he recognise progress in demolishing a living school to create what is described as a pocket park? Or would he shake his head and wonder how a government in 2025 could think of closing a school in order to create a green space representing and say that it represents enlightened planning? Sir, the proposal before us, as advanced in opposition to the Constable's proposal, I don't think is the vision that I would want the legacy to be. It is confusion dressed as regeneration, if I may say. We are told, of course, that St Luke's is unfit for purpose. I accept that, but I do not accept, after having listened to some of the parents as the Constable spoke in his opening remarks and speaking to some of the children, that is a statement of fact that cannot be dealt with. It seems to me that it is a statement of convenience, not of evidence, if I may say. The school buildings are old, yes, but they're also loved, and they're part of a community. And the individual, and he's not the only, that person is not the only one, that said that shutting St Luke's School is like ripping out the heart of Georgetown. I must say I have learnt that those people that make that view known and have expressed it to me, and then, of course, not 100%, because some want a new school on the town park. But I think that the people that want their school to stay need to be heard. Communities are not about statistics on a spreadsheet, sir. It's not just about funding. Schools, as we know, are living organisms. Once you take away their beating heart, they don't recover. There are examples all over the place of schools that have been shut. And they are controversial when they're shut, and quite right too. I say so, it cannot be beyond the collective imagination of this Assembly and the Council of Ministers to find better and, as said by Deputy War and the Constable, better financial alternatives too. The school at St Luke's grew out of those, originally I think out of the church buildings. The States bought it in 1981 as best as I can see, and then the vicarage was also built. They've been modernised and renewed, and it's the school that we find today, which isn't fit for purpose, but why write it off? I also want to be absolutely clear that I support the ambition of the Constable of St Helier, despite the fact I was on the other side of the ring-binder debate, because I wanted an underground only because I wanted an underground car park, which the Constable accepts, and I would have wanted an underground car park with a park on top. So let not their reform foot stamping be any indication of my lack of support for a town park, because I do agree with it. It's just I would have preferred having a car park underneath, but the park is important. And I would like also to say that it is really important that that town park is extended. It is a breathing room for lungs that are going to be increasingly less functionable, because it is one of the most dense, as far as I know, and I can tell from the statistics, it is going to be, if it is not already, one of the densest urban environments in St Helier. I believe that some of the arguments were advanced when the planning committee considered, and officials considered the applications for some of the very much needed and very well constructed apartments in the area, not of which all have been built yet. They were made maybe they were given an easier passage by the planning committee and the officials, because of the knowledge that there was a commitment given at the time for the extending of the town park. Members also know that there is undoubted changing minds in terms of the importance of parks and spaces. I don't need to remind the Assembly that Andiam has a prohibition on balls for really understandable in many of their living spaces. You can't kick a ball. You can't run about in some of the Andian properties as brilliantly internally created as they are. And the idea that, the people of St Helier are not going to have that green space as the density will increase in years to come is, I think, members can think for themselves. Think about 10 years' time when there's a school there and there's all the other apartments around there and there's no green lung, and it could have been. It's an opportunity, and it shouldn't be, and therefore maximum effort should be made to make best use of resources, of which green resources are absolutely at a premium. It seems to me that to say no to the Constable's reasonable request to reconsider this and to consider other options is illogical in the extreme. I would call it, frankly, bonkers, sir. I have also served as a deputy. I know members don't like me talking about the past, but I have to. I have been a deputy of St Helier number 3 with Rouge Bouillon, and I know that that school is in a very difficult situation, albeit delivering brilliant education with such a small amount of open space, which, given the amount of children with SEND needs, etc., in that particular school, I'm not sure what proportions to others. It's now vital that Rouge Bouillon gets some love and attention, as new schools such as St Martin, which is such a wonderful place to go to, as many of the other country parish schools. I believe that love can be given to Rouge Bouillon. I don't know where the plan went as the office holder that had to deal with the police station and moving that. I thought that the police station site was going to be used to extend Rouge Bouillon School. And if it isn't, what happened to that idea? It seems to me far more, if it's possible to move the police station service, it's possible to move the fire service. And if the Minister for Infrastructure wants any clues, then he may want to reconsider his position in relation to the fuel farm and where to put the fire for the fire engines. They'd be quite near to the police station if you'd put it on. If you could do away with the blast zone requirement at La Collette. So, in other words, the fire station and fire engines could be relocated much more easily, and therefore we could envision a brilliantly regenerated Rouge Bouillon school. I'm asking the Council of Ministers, sir, are they really abandoning all the other options? Are they really saying that Rouge Bouillon and St Luke's cannot be extended? Are they really saying the fire service is going to be stuck where it is? It was supposed to be a temporary solution, as best as I recall. It seems to me that we're choosing the path of least resistance and not the path of greatest wisdom, where we are asked to accept what is a suboptimal solution that appears to tell parishioners to smile politely where their schools disappear in the name of progress. It's not progress, sir. It's an abdication of imagination. This Assembly has a duty, I would suggest, to not only respect the fiscal prudence of those past people who have contributed. The Council of Ministers may want to, not suggesting that they should be churchgoers, but maybe they should attend St Luke's Church and see what the situation there is with their community centre and their buildings that are in sad needs of improvement. Schools are about communities, and a school is a community that survives adversity. And once you sever that link, you create displacement, rootlessness and loss. And as for the idea that you're going to bus all these children from Georgetown into the town park school, I've never heard anything so crazy. The catchment area of St Luke's School, as I've sat and watched it, is within the area of St Luke's. And those families and those children are going to have to be put in a car and dropped off in the most densely, as he's rightly said, the most densely area of town. I mean, really, do members not have any understanding? Can they not actually imagine what a sort of a nightmare we're going to create? I also find it slightly ironic, sir, that the man that gave us the Howard Davis Park is having the school that he attended to bulldozed and being replaced by the prevention of another park that's actually massively inferior to the one that he vowed to create and we all enjoy. The Deputy of St Saviour don't have to talk about their park because we've got one and it's brilliant and it's underused and it's brilliantly located next to a school Yes, there's a busy road, but solutions can be found. It's about renewal, and that's town renewal that, of course, extends not into Greater St Helier, but into St Saviour. The park extension, going back to that, was, as I said, one of the justifications. It was a bridging island plan, I heard, when I was out of this assembly. It was a bridging island plan that ended this year. And I'm sorry, but it needs to be looked at again. I ask members to really consider, are we going to send a message to say, no, we can't do anything with St Luke's and Rouge-Boyon for the reasons I've said? No, the only thing is to put concrete on the gasworks site that was promised as an extension. So I commend the constable. I absolutely commend the volunteering of all those town park supporters group who have championed this without much thanks often and without much seemingly support from the Council of Ministers of various different times. But they are right, and they need our continued support, and they'll get it from this Deputy of St Saviour, because I believe in the town park extension. It was vital then, and it's even more vital now and into the future. And I say to members, please support the Constable of St Helier. He's been quite right, and he's been consistent.
Thank you, Deputy. Deputy Taddeo.
Thank you, sir. What a way to rewrite history. So the member who voted against having a town park in 2009, which he's admitted, he voted against the £10 million for a park. But he wants a larger park now. So it's strange how politics can change in the space of 16 or 17 years. And I'm looking back actually at the vote, because let's remind ourselves of what the genesis of this was. It wasn't a Constable Crowcroft proposition, or Deputy Constable Crowcroft back at the time, although he did support it, to be fair. It was because Deputy Southern sought to bring an amendment to a government plan, a budget, and it succeeded in the most remarkable of ways, didn't it? And if we look back actually who is still in the Assembly from that vote, we notice, by my count, there are 5 members still here who voted for it, including the Constable of St Helier. Then we have Constable Ms Burian, as she is now, and I think was then, Deputy Southern and myself. And have I missed anybody? I make that as 4. And Deputy Labby, how could I forget Deputy Labby? It's because she sits behind me. That's why. So those are the 5 members that voted for the town park. And I should say that any one of us, of course, can say that the town park happened because of us, because it was won by 1 vote. And we could say that if we hadn't voted for it, we would have no town park. So that's both factual and probably slightly misleading. But I'll leave it at that. And then I think there were 4 members, current members, who voted against certainly Deputy Southern's amendment, which gave us the money for the town park, the £10 million, who was Deputy Gorse at the time, Constable of St Saviour, Deputy Ozef, who I've already mentioned, and who have I missed? The Constable of St Brelard. So it's 4, so 5-4 in other words. So I hope that's the reflection of, no reflection of anyone's support for the idea of the town park. So I speak very much as somebody who was a supporter of the town park, and I would like to just bring a different perspective on it. And now, because we've already gone back further in time, Deputy Ozef gave us a story about T.B. Davis. What would T.B. Davis think about what's being proposed here? Well, let's look at a little story about T.B. Davis. We know that his big legacy to the island was Howard Davis Park, in memory of his son. There's a good website which I've referred to before called Jerrypedia. It's basically Jersey's equivalent of Wikipedia. Got lots of interesting Jersey history on it. Most of it's correct. There are a few errors, but can't always be perfect. And the following is a story that was in one of your political forebears' memoirs, the former bailiff Alexander Coutanche, if I can call him a political forebear, sir, or former bailiff, is probably more accurate.
Yes.
He was, of course, he did need to be political during the war in a way that I suppose not any bailiff has needed to be since. And he said that as a boy, Davis was in the choir at St Luke's Church, and one Sunday he went looking for conkers with a friend, Walter Braithwaite, in the gardens of the neighbouring house at Plaisance, as it was called. They were caught by the owner, who was another distinguished gentleman called Jurat Joshua George Fall, who let Braithwaite go with a letter asking his mother to punish him suitably. I'm wondering if that's a great plan. I'm not sure if he could have trusted. I wouldn't have delivered that letter to my mother necessarily. So he showed some confidence there. So I think I've forgotten the letter. But he confined Davis to his cellar to clean his boots whilst he had lunch. And when Davis was eventually freed, we're told in this write-up, sir, that he had a colourful vocabulary for a young boy. He told the Jurat, "One day I shall be a rich man, I shall buy your house." I think there's some ellipsis there, I'm not sure if we're supposed to put an adjective in. "And I shall pull it down stone by stone." True to his word, T.B. Davis made his fortune overseas, returned to Jersey a very rich man, and bought Plaisance from Lily Fall, the Jurat's daughter. He had to leave for South Africa, but instructed his friend Coutange to ensure that the building was demolished and not a stone left standing. It does say on his return he was less pleased with the result because he realised that they'd left the cellar in which he was imprisoned. So when it comes to what would T.B. Davis do, he obviously doesn't have any qualms about ripping down houses and building something else in its place, or in fact, maybe building nothing at all. So he does have form for that, even if he did have a grudge. So I'm not suggesting he would necessarily have any grudge against his own at school. But I like to think that T.B. Davis, as a businessman and somebody who was a go-getter and realised that the world didn't stay still, would probably accept the fact that actually the world does need to move on. He would probably be more concerned about the ethos and the intangible community of St. Luke's School rather than necessarily the bricks and mortar of the school, in the same way that I am, as a proud former student of both Lemoy, well, in fact, all of Lemoy, Le Kennevet and Holier schools. Two of those schools don't exist anymore. Holier School doesn't exist in the old brick format that it used to be, where the current Oakfield is. It's got a brand spanking new school behind it, and it's also got an excellent sports facility there, which we never had as youngsters. I remember as an aspiring but not especially talented basketball player, the height helps, but that was not much else. We had a tiny little gymnasium, sir, in which, barely you could get 3x3 teams when you should be able to have had a 5-on-5 session with adequate room for substitutes. So we had none of that luxury. And I'm not complaining, so I think we had an adequate education. And it was the same at Le Kennevet. It was already overcrowded by the time I was there in 1990. That's been converted, you could argue, into suboptimal but necessary hospital arrangement at the moment, so I'll get back to that shortly. And even at Lemoy School, I'm sure I have memories of being in porter cabins, and if that's not true, it was certainly the case when I was at Le Kennevet School, where we had many of our French and maths lessons in porter cabins whilst there was structural work going on. And I suspect it must have had a disruption on us, and if not on us, certainly on the teachers, who were having to mill around, move between classroom to classroom and deal with leaking roofs. That's not something I think the students hopefully have to do in the new Le Kennevet or in the new Holier School. So good luck to them, and I hope it helps with the education. But of course, education is not just about the buildings, it's about the community of the school, and I think that's much more important. I did go up to Le Passereau, I think I mentioned it last time we had the debate, and I was frankly both heartened by the commitment of staff, but also shocked by the conditions in which staff and pupils up there have to live in and have to go to school in. And there was a strip, I've mentioned it before, a strip of AstroTurf. That's how we're treating some of the most vulnerable students in our community. And this idea that that we're going to remove a community from St. Luke's. Well, if you live equidistantly between St. Luke's and the town park, it's not going to make any difference if you're in that catchment area. If you happen to live a little bit closer to the town park than you do to St. Luke's, and you currently go to St. Luke's, then that's going to be better for you. There'll be winners and losers. And I would like to have heard actually a constable of St. Helier saying, we will make sure that we encourage and roll out walking routes, cycling routes to be able to get to school. Because ultimately, if it's easier to get to school walking than it is in a car, that's what parents and children will do. The last thing I'll say in this debate is that let's bring this a bit closer to home, because we're both dealing with constituency issues. It's absolutely natural. And I don't criticise, by the way, the Constable of St Helier for maintaining this. I think he's been consistent in his desire to have a large town park, a larger town park than is currently present. I think other members haven't. I think other members, and certainly members of the previous Council of Ministers, have flip-flopped on this issue. And I think one would question exactly why they might have done that. I don't think the facts have substantially changed, as some former members might have suggested. So I look at what my position might have been if this was in Lekeneve. And at the time when the previous governments were looking to move the outpatients up to Lekeneve into what is now the Enid Keno Centre, which I think is actually been quite well received by the local community, not just in St Brelard, but it's convenient for so many reasons. Any one of us could have started a campaign saying, going around knocking on doors saying, do you think we should have a park here? And I think a lot of the residents would have said, yeah, that's a great idea. So why don't we have a park here? We can have a park. I know we've got Lekeneve playing fields, but why don't we try and maybe even extend Lekeneve playing fields onto this area? Because it does abut it, actually, just across the cycle track. We could make that into another facility for whatever sporting facility, or just a park. If we'd have got momentum for that, I think we could have had a really good campaign. And we said, what a terrible government that we've got, is that they don't want you to have a park. And of course, the idea of the park was never on the table in the first place. So it's the counterfactual that I would have been conjuring out of a hat, dangling in front of them and saying, oh, you're not going to get your park now. That's terrible. In fact, the needs of the wider community, I think quite rightly, were put first. Is that what are the primary needs? The primary need here is that there is a facilities crisis, I would say, going on when it comes to primary schools in St Helier. And it's something which subsequent governments, many governments now, and going back a couple, have also realised, and that they would have wanted to deliver by now. And so the needs of the wider community must outweigh, I think, the nice-to-haves, and I don't mind putting it in that sense, the nice-to-haves of a slightly larger park, because we don't even know what size park we're talking about. We've got a suggestion that actually something else should now go on there, not a school, but maybe a community facility, which would still not be a park. And we've got others campaigning that it must absolutely all be green space. And the last thing I have to object to is that I have no problem with people campaigning open-handedly and honestly about saying we need a new park. But when I saw the leaflet that went round saying what government's proposing here is a luxury new school, I'm sorry, that was just one step too far. It's not a luxury new school, it's just a fit-for-purpose modern school with all the equipment that you need. And I think that is, for me, just feels slightly distasteful that that kind of campaign should have taken place, when actually I think we needed a much more honest and much more measured debate about what could go where. And also the other counterfactual is, if I were also representing that area, I would be very interested to say to the people around Springfield who live there in one of the most congested parts of St Helier, you have got the opportunity of having a park now. Some might call it disparagingly a pocket park. Actually, what we've got an opportunity to create there, and perhaps I've heard of two possibilities, is that there would be some decent green lungs in that part of St Helier, and I think that would be vastly appreciated by those who live in the area. It's not getting rid of the Millennium Town Park, and I would certainly be protesting if that were the case. It's actually about having a community facility called a school, which children can have access to the park, and it also creating green space in other parts of St Helier. So I'm also happy to reject this proposition and let the Council of Ministers and future governments get on with the building of this.
Thank you, Deputy. Does anyone else speak on this proposition? Deputy Balash, then Deputy Catherine Curtis. Deputy Balash.
So the Constable may have an uphill task, but it seems to me that the Assembly should not dismiss this proposal out of hand. It's difficult to stop a bus that has started to move, and the question, it seems to me, is really whether anything substantial has changed from the time when the decision to construct a school was first made. And it seems to me at least arguable that things have changed. We are talking about something that is at root a planning issue. How should land in St Helier be used in the best interests of the community? It's not really an educational issue, except to the extent that it's a question of how best to provide educational facilities. Has anything changed? Well, the first thing that has obviously changed, it seems to me, is that our financial situation is not as rosy as it once was. I forget the word that the chief executive, Precarious, thank you. Precarious was the word used by the chief executive, and it's a theme, I think, which will be taken up to a very large extent when we come to debate the budget later in the year. Is there a more economic way of achieving the ends that we want to achieve? The second thing which arguably it seems to me has changed is the demographic issue. No one doubts that there have been demographic changes. Pupil numbers in 2024 to 2025 in primary schools are 14,762, and in 15 years' time they will be 12,045. That's 2,700 fewer primary school children. That must have a huge effect upon the need for a new and expensive primary school. The department says that schools will then be at 72% of capacity. That's an awful lot of empty desks, nearly a quarter, in fact. So do we really need, or is it in the best interests of our community, given our financial situation, that we should be contemplating the spending of tens of millions of pounds on a new school when it might be possible to reconfigure and modernise the existing schools, not least for the reason in the case of St Luke's given by Deputy Ozuf. Thirdly, the Constable refers to and seeks an analysis of the health and other benefits of the existing town park, and that's something, it is true, that we do not have at the moment. The Council of Ministers pooh-poohed the suggestion that that was a good idea in 5 lines. 2 of those lines referred to the proposed new park on the Springfield School site. But that area is only 5,400 square metres. That's 70 yards long, 75 yards wide. That's not, in my view, a park. That is a medium-sized garden. The Constable is surely right that this is a once-in-a-century opportunity to create a real park in St Helier. Howard Davis Park is 40,000 square metres, but that's on the wrong side of town for those living in the vicinity of Springfield. We should be, it seems to me, absolutely sure before we abandon the opportunity of creating a new park, a substantial new park in this part of St Helier, that it's the right decision. We do need to look at the demographics in the context of a new school. We need to balance up the benefits, ecological, environmental, social, and so on, of a real park in this crowded part of St Helier against the need for a new school. It seems to me that before we press ahead, the case should be proved beyond all reasonable doubt. I think that the Constable has made a compelling case for a pause for reflection and for investigation as suggested in his proposition.
Thank you, Deputy. Deputy Catherine Curtis.
Thank you, sir. There's a lot being said on this matter, but the facts are that there are people living near the Millennium Park and others who use it who would like to see it extended, and that the schools, Springfield, St Luke's and La Passerelle, are not adequate in terms of space and facilities, and anyone who doesn't agree with this, please go to the schools and speak to the head teachers. They are very well-run schools, and there will be parents who don't want change, but these schools do not have adequate facilities, and that's not fair on the children. And that the area at the end of the park is the intended site for a new school, and no other suitable site has been found. So those are the facts. And then we have this proposition from the Constable of St Helier to reconsider the town school site. I did wonder if this proposition is being brought now as a delaying tactic so that no decision is made on this controversial issue until after the next election. It's not easy to vote for something in your district when there is a very active campaigning group set against the matter. But we as States members are here to make decisions, no matter how difficult. The public has little respect for us when we put off making a decision. We had this ongoing with the new hospital for a long time, and here we go again, it seems. I do, though, have respect for the campaigners who want to extend the park, and I fully understand their desire for a larger park. But the fact is, there is no alternative site for this town school. I'm fortunate to have been in the position of chair of the Children Education and Home Affairs Scrutiny Panel for this government and for the last government. During the last government, all potential school sites were explored, with the outcome being that the Gas Place site was the chosen site for the new school. The intention of this school is to be a community school. That is, it will be open to members of the public for other uses. There will be a walkway through to St Saviour's Road. There will be a 3G pitch for use by the community. So the siting of a new school here does not mean that people in the area will not be able to access the site. The families who live in the area will also be able to access the site outside of school hours for activities, classes and sports. And I will do everything that I can to ensure that this new school building is open to residents for community uses. And I hope that the campaigners for a larger park will understand that they will not lose all access to this space. We've also had some concerns raised by campaigners about the size of the proposed school. Well, we already have Doverne Primary School, which has more than 450 pupils and is a very effective large primary school with space and suitable facilities, which is what the new school will be offering. The current plans also include new parks at Springfield and Le Bar Centre. Smaller parks are a feature of many towns, and anyone who has spent much time in France or Spain will be familiar with the lovely pockets of greenery dotted throughout the towns. The Constable of St Helier referred in his speech to the new youth centre, and I have to respond to that. The new youth centre, which will include the Youth Inquiry Service, is a great project. I've been around the building with the youth service leader, the Director of Young People's Services, with the CEHA panel members and with Deputy Ferry. I've examined the plans and seen the preliminary clearance works underway. It is going to bring a huge uplift to the area, and I'd say that this is one of the very best projects that's got underway during this government. And I cannot understand how any states member who has the best interests of the island's children at heart would not support the new town youth centre. I also cannot understand why the Constable of St Helier is not hugely supportive of this centre and was also not already familiar with all the town schools but had to be invited by the Education Minister. I don't know what to say really about the suggestion in the report to the proposition that children could be bused out to country schools. It's a totally impractical idea. There is no way that children between the ages of 3 and 11 could be safely dropped to the bottom of a block of flats. No way that separate buses could be used to move these children around to after-school clubs and then back to town. And even if it did occur, it would be really bad for little children to be spending so much time on a bus. All of us here who've had their secondary school children use the school bus service know how long and tiring these trips can be. And that is not okay for a 4-year-old, for example. Families who live in the area will be able to walk their children to school just as my grandchildren walked to Springfield School when they were pupils there. I hope we can move forwards and discard this proposition. We need a new school which is designed with good facilities for town children, including a much greater population of children with special educational needs. We have a suitable site available, which can also be used for the community. So I urge members to vote against this proposition.
Thank you, Deputy. Deputy Moore.
Thank you, sir. I'm pleased to follow the previous speaker who made a very clear and eloquent speech and raised many good points. So I can assure members that I will do my very best on my feet to make my points clearer and not to repeat hers. So essentially, Deputy Balash, with all due respect, mentioned in his speech that a pause was required in order to search for a better solution. Well, sir, I'm afraid the problem with pausing to search for a better solution is that that pause can last an incredibly long time. We know from experience that it took us 25 years to deliver a police station. 25 years. Rouge-Bouillon School has been on the list for reprioritisation and redevelopment for almost 20 years, I think. And there are many, many other sites, of course, the hospital being one of them. And indeed, I have to remind members that, regrettably, the Constable does have some form on protecting parks. And a constituent recently pointed out to me that the People's Park in St Helier may indeed have the greatest cost per square foot of any park in the world, because they claimed that has cost us at least £600 million at the current rate, given that the cost of the hospital that was proposed for People's Park was less than £300 million, and now we are seeing the alternative costing considerably more. So we have to be very mindful of what we wish for. As the Minister has already pointed out, the cost of delivering this school has already increased considerably, and it would be unwise to put ourselves in a place where we are increasing costs further for much needed facilities for our community. I do also want to make a point about demographic change and the decline in our birth rate. We are seeking, quite rightly, policy reforms to encourage childcare, to support families so that they can thrive in the island, with the very aim of turning around that demographic decline and ensuring that families can grow up and live and thrive in our island community. So we should not give up on them. We should be planning schools to accept a future demographic that will go through those schools, because education will be the key for protecting our future generation. And if we cannot focus on education for that future generation, then I'm afraid, sir, we really shouldn't be here at all. Much has been made of the importance of green space, and I absolutely understand that importance of green space, but we also have a Bridging Island plan that made a requirement for green space to be within walking distance of people's homes. Well, there are people living in parts of St Helier. Many of them are children at Springfield School, of whom 85% have no access to open space when they go home in the evening, whether that be public or private open space. And it's simply not acceptable. So those children from Springfield who are going to parts of St Saviour or parts of northern St Helier have not got the ability at their age to walk to the Millennium Park and enjoy it, whether or not it is extended. So we should be providing them with those smaller parks within the vicinity of their homes that we put in our budget in 2022, when members supported the creation of a park on the Springfield school site, as well as the Labar Centre, to encourage the greater greening of our town and improving the environment for all St Helier residents and those on the St Saviour's borders. Because we have to prioritise and look at the holistic approach of our built-up areas. And so, as tempting as it is to support the Constable in his campaign, I sincerely hope that members will not support him, although I will perhaps support Part D, which will I believe, be a sensible thing to monitor the air quality in the environment around those schools, something that I do believe that was agreed by the Assembly some long time ago. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Deputy. Does any other speak on this proposition? Conatable Greville.
Thank you, sir. I rise to support the chairperson of the Children Education and Home Affairs Scrutiny Panel, of which I am a member. We, sir, have visited all these schools, as my colleagues have as well. And I would go one step further than the Conatable of St Helier by saying that the principal and the staff at St Luke's School are positively heroic. And I say that because they are struggling on a daily basis with the facility they have. And I'm somewhat confused. It has been suggested in this assembly that that school is to be bulldozed. I don't think it is, sir, and I will be corrected if I'm wrong, but I believe it's going to be repurposed for an educational facility. So I think the scaremongering around St Luke's being demolished is not correct. But that is something that I think should be mentioned in this chamber. I too have seen the facilities at Springfield. They are very dated, and I think, as the previous speaker has said, it would make an excellent pocket park near to LaCoy, near to the Play.com site. I think the Labar Centre would serve the Mayfair site and possibly the Apollo site when it's built, the Hotel Rec site, and indeed all of the apartments at Woodville Avenue. There's areas there, sir, which are very dense indeed when it comes to new flats. So I will not be supporting this recommendation at all. And I'm also a member of the Planning Committee, and we've already made provision within the Bridging Island plan for a school on this site. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Conatable. Deputy Andrews.
Thank you, sir. I am standing up in support of the Conatable St Helier, sir. I was on social media and I wanted to hear the views of my constituents, but also the views of the constituents of St Helier South and Central. And it was very clear when I was engaging with people that they were antithetical about the development of the school. What they really want to see is the extension of Millennium Park. For many young families, they are already struggling. the space at Millennium Park is relatively small in actual fact when you're looking at the population who live in a very densely populated area. And when I look at, say, the north of St Helier and also some of the rural parishes, I mean, we've got plenty of space, haven't we, there? But, of course, people in St Helier, Central and South, they don't really have much green space. And I think they deserve more green space, I really do. I know people have touched on about the lowering birth rate, and of course it is a problem, but we also need to be more pragmatic about this. We need to make sure that we right-size education to meet the needs of our population. It potentially could mean that there will be less primary schools in the future. Potentially our classrooms could be smaller. That's just the way how it is. But if we are going to maintain the buildings that we have and maintain the level of operational costs, then no wonder why we have an issue with public sector spend. We need to be really pragmatic about this. What we need to be doing is we need to be looking at the trends in population and population growth, and in some areas where growth is not seen. Because speaking to many parents in particular who wanted to speak to me about the Millennium Park development, they're more concerned about the traffic and the impact that traffic will have in the mornings in St Helier and in St Saviour. There are many schools, especially when we're looking at the east side of St Helier as well. I've, often in the past travelled at, say, 8:15 in the morning, and I'm stuck in traffic. I remember all of those years ago when I was heading to college. And the reason being is because there are so many schools in the area, and I think that problem is only going to get worse. I don't think it's going to get any better anytime soon. So I thought I would just stand up as a St Helier deputy. Of course, I'm in St Helier North. It's not within my constituency, but I feel that I do owe it to my connotab that I support him, and I also support my constituents who have made it very clear to me that they don't want the school to proceed. Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy. Does anyone else wish to speak on this proposition? I call upon the Deputy Brenneth.
Thank you, sir. I'd start by saying that, of course, an extension to the town park would be great. And of course, it would be a better park as a result. And if we were just deciding whether or not to extend the park with nothing else at stake, then it would be easy to support it. But that's not the decision we're being asked to make. Because it's also the case that we need a new school. We have a pressing need. And Deputy Balash raised the question of whether something fundamental has changed since the decision was taken. And I don't think anything fundamental has changed. The financial situation has changed, as Deputy Balash suggested, but the analysis of which option offers the best value has already been done many, many times. Abandoning the new school will not be a more financially prudent option. Whilst reviews are underway, costs will increase. What will happen if the review decides, as every review has done, that the best option is the gas place site? Then we will have added enormously to expense for no reason. On demographics, Deputy Moore pointed out that we are trying to reverse those demographic trends. But I would also point out that we don't know how the future will turn out in demographics. In my view, it's a racing certainty that population will increase in the future. Indeed, in the last couple of years, population rose by 350 in 2023 and 510 last year. That population rise was driven by net immigration, but guess what? Many of those people coming to the island will have children, or have children, when they are here. The headroom that exists, as detailed in the Minister's report on future numbers, is not so great that we could complacently say, oh, we don't need that extra capacity. The best that is being offered, it seems to me, by the opponents of this school and the desire to postpone decisions is there might be better alternatives. There might. be better alternatives. Perhaps refurbishment of existing schools, perhaps a new school at one of a number of sites, extend existing schools, move the fire station. So none of it is real. It's all possibilities, tantalising options, but they do not exist. They may come to something, they may not. It is too easy to casually suggest tantalising options in response to a concrete proposal. And I can knock one of those on the head from my experience in government, which was the fire service. I think Deputy Joseph argued that it was easy to move. Well, no, it is not easy to move. Loads of work has been done on this. It is, in the parlance, a very bad neighbour. People do not want fire services next to them. A huge amount of work was done by the government of which I was a member to try and find alternatives. It is a difficult thing to do. Just wafting these ideas around as alternatives is not going to solve the problem. The question of traffic. All I would say here is that there is traffic around schools currently. There will be traffic around a new school. It is a redistribution of traffic. The question of the longer-term solution of dealing with that will come when we take sustainable transport seriously. Create safe, good routes to schools for people to walk and cycle, and they will use them. One of the things that gives me greatest pleasure as I cycle to town every day along the railway walk is seeing how many people cycle and walk to my old school at Lemoy. I pass them in both directions, coming up from Corbière and down from Le Cannevet. That's because there is a brilliant, safe route for people to use. We are lucky out west. If we want to do that in town, we can do it. We can do it, and I will support anyone who tries to do that. Our government was the government of which I was a member, was working on various routes that would have gone through town, that would have connected up the hill schools down into town and so on. I don't know what's happened to that, but the point is that we can do that. Yes, the constable can reply, but it hasn't happened yet. Well, he's an assistant minister in this government. These possibilities do exist, and I would like to see them brought, and I will certainly stand shoulder to shoulder with the constable should he be proposing those kind of measures. The question of pocket parks, which is divisive, I think, it is not the case. I would say, I lived in London for 20 years. I enjoyed large parks and small parks, some very small parks. One very small park off Marylebone High Street that I used to travel some distance to get to enjoy because it was such a pleasant little spot under shaded trees and so on. Pocket parks can be beautiful sanctuaries just as well as large parks can be. And I would say that, yes, it does depend. Small parks are harder sometimes to control behaviours and so on going on in them, but not necessarily. As I say, I went to a pocket park that was a very, very good park. And I'd also say that even big parks can be relatively hard to maintain as in good order and with good behaviour. Winston Churchill Park in my parish often pops up during the summer on social media as problems with behaviours and so on. So I think pocket parks are a reasonable and good option, and as other members have said, offer the opportunity for for people to who have currently very little access to open space, to have an open space very near to their homes. I'm not going to pretend that pocket parks compensate on a one-for-one basis for the lack of an extension of the Millennium Park. But that is not the whole story. What we're talking about is pocket parks plus a desperately needed new school. A school that will be developed much more quickly than any of the alternative sites, which don't even exist as concrete proposals. We cannot have everything we want here. There is a choice to be made. But I think finally, sir, the fundamental point that I want to make in arguing against this proposition. The fundamental issue for me is that we are so bad at sticking to decisions. It is something that struck me before we stood for election. It was something I kind of, I suppose, vowed to try and do something about. And here we are again with a process that has delivered a result, that has led difficult decisions, difficult debates in the government of which I was a member, but has led to a resolution. And alternatives were debated at the time. And yet here we are again, considering tantalizing options that might exist in some future world against something that we have committed to. And the hospital is, of course, the case study par excellence. There has to come a point when we accept something that we don't like is something that has already been decided. And it is not in the island's best interest to keep relitigating. And for my own part, as far as this matter is concerned, I think that point has been reached. I think the public despair at our inability to get things done. There is no perfect solution here. Of course, an extension to the Millennium Park is an intoxicating idea. It would be wonderful. But let us imagine that we go back to the drawing board. Let's say this proposition passes. Let's say we get another long delay. Let's say we get more analysis. And, of course, in the meantime, an election with another chance to reverse the decision in the other direction. Again, I think that is not a sensible course of action. And for myself, I think town deserves a new purpose-built school, just as my constituents in St. Brillard have benefited from a new school.
Thank you, Deputy. Deputy War.
Thank you, sir, and pleasure to follow Deputy Renather. I've been on a journey when it comes to the issue of extending Millennium Park. Back in 2022, so I'm actually quite relieved that Deputy Taddy said, the world doesn't stay still. Back in 2022, before the election, I said no ifs, no buts, that the Gas Place site should become an extension of Millennium Park. When I was in government, however, the Council of Ministers at the time were persuaded by the then Education Minister, Ina Gardner, that it was a prime site for a major new St Heliers school. Other sites had been presented, but none other could provide the necessary space. So despite my election words at the time, I voted in favour of a new school because of collective responsibility. Reform Jersey then brought a proposition to the Assembly to ask for a delay in the building of the new Norton Quarter homes, to allow time to check out if this site would be appropriate for a new school. If that were the case, they would support a park extension. The proposition was turned down as the Education Department at the time deemed the site too small, plus all the planning permissions had been granted to build more homes. Many of those much needed homes, though, have now been delivered, going some way to relieve our housing crisis. So things do get done when decisions are made. Following the change of government, I've revisited that original decision and concluded, for the reasons I'm now going to explain, that an extension to the park and the retention of the old gas showroom is absolutely the right move. There are three key issues: the health and well-being of our community, changing demographics, and the sheer cost of not only delivering a school, but also a St Helier Youth Centre. Over 1,000 new residents have moved into this part of St Helier. These aren't townhouses with their own small garden. They are mostly 1- and 2-bedroom flats, whose only private outdoor space is a balcony. And it was good to hear Deputy Curtis refer to blocks of flats, because she's absolutely right. That is what we have. These residents need a shared space. You only have to look at how extensively the play area in Millennium Park is used today to understand the demand for this type of space. The Minister suggests that a few pocket parks will make up for the loss of an extended park. It seems obvious to me that all this does is make safeguarding issues more complicated. And in a society that is already fragmented, park fragmentation only exacerbates the problem. In a society that is already broken, we don't need broken parks. The capacity of the existing park, built for 1,000 fewer residents, is already creaking. Surely we owe it to the health and well-being of our community to extend the park. And I'd just like to add a little addendum here, because Deputy Ward mentioned about Parade Gardens and the success there and how Deputy Feltham had got that over the line. I'd just like to remind members that actually it was a lady called Emily Jennings who actually designed that and built it to such an exciting park it is today. Changing demographics. This is something else which has only been flagged over the last couple of years and is a significant reason as to why I have changed my mind. Sadly, birth rates are at record lows. This isn't unique to Jersey, it's something that is happening globally. Whilst the Minister will argue that the demographics of town are different to those of the country parishes, and I agree with him on that point, is it appropriate to go knocking down some of the existing school provision just because these buildings aren't as efficient as they should be due to age and design? I would argue that it's not about the buildings. We've heard today about how extraordinary the teachers are. It's about what is happening inside those buildings that matters. I was recently given a tour of Springfield School. It was an absolute pleasure. The kids and staff were amazing. It was, however, pointed out to me that there was a leak in the roof in one of the classrooms, and I've just struck this morning when we had this promoted advert. I wondered if that money had gone to the promoted advertising the JP could have helped fix the roof at Springfield. This is surely a simple maintenance issue. We need to be looking after our buildings, not leaving them to rot because we prefer a nice new shiny one. It's the budget for maintenance we should be looking at, not the budget for a new school. I do recognise that schools like Springfield are at capacity, and some of this is because of the rise in children with special needs. In fact, a member of my staff has a child attending Springfield with special needs. She doesn't talk about the state of the building. She talks about how well looked after her child is. That's what really matters to parents. It also reflects that we need to keep our primary schools at a scale that remains intimate and not anonymise our kids in super schools. If though there is an argument for more capacity, what exactly does that look like? I haven't seen any numbers, and interestingly enough, at an earlier discussion at the town hall, the Minister said, actually, it's not about capacity. So what is it then, Minister? What are we building a new school for if it's not about capacity? All I ever hear is, we need a new school. That brings me on to costs, because ultimately, there is only so much to go round. How do we get the biggest bang for our buck? How do we meet the needs of all the stakeholders? Where does compromise lie? Right now, we've just seen the budget allocation for the St Helier Youth Centre rise by over 55% from its original budget to a whopping £16 million plus. As a result, there is no money for the Skye project. These are some of the tough choices that have to be made. We've just seen that the cost of buying the Gas Place site from Andium Homes isn't £1, it's 15 million. The method of payment suggested has been to reduce the annual dividend paid by Andium to the Treasury. This means that savings will need to be made in other areas of the States due to the reduced income. It's ironic that some time back, Andium were offering to build a park for free, recognising the impact of all those building works. Then there is the cost of a new school. A figure of £30 million has been suggested. However, nothing close to this number has been budgeted for in the current government plan. So what are the alternatives? The clearest and most obvious is to repurpose the old Social Security building. The current price tag for the purchase of the building is around £3 million. Plus, we are not starting from scratch. The reality is we are not looking at the existing asset base in St Helier and thinking how best it can be used. That's criminal. And I would just go on to add that between the discussions at Paris and St Helier and today, I've actually had an owner of a major office block, which is currently vacated, 5 floors of huge space, who said, I would happily take in a temporary school if you're looking to refurbish existing schools in St Helier. These are the hidden assets that we're not using and not talking about. A school at Phillips Lefevre House is perfectly plausible. After all, there was a school there in this area years ago. It frees up the Gas Place site and allows the Gas Place showroom to be repurposed for community use. Everyone wins. If we need to refurbish Rouge-Briand, Springfield and St Luke's on a rotational basis by moving children to Philip Lefevre House temporarily, then let's do that. We're going to be saving millions and we'll have created a long-term sustainable use that both meets our educational needs and the health and well-being needs. I want now, though, to turn to an email I received from a very concerned parent whose children go to St Luke's. She asks, where's the consultation with parents of children from this school? And I'll quote this. Dear Deputy, 2 of my children are currently enjoying their education at St Luke's School, and I think the current plan to merge St Luke into a larger school at the Town Park Gas Place site is a terrible idea and absolutely not the correct fit for my children. I'm not against your idea to build a new school. Some schools are in dire need, and St Luke's School is far from perfect. But St Luke's needs to remain a single intake school for the students, like my children, who struggle when they are overwhelmed. St Luke's is currently a 3-minute walk to the beach and 90 seconds walk to Howard Davis Park. Its location is enriching, imaginative, and holistically so good for my children. The proposed location of the new school is truly awful. Our 19-minute walk to St Luke's takes us along a pedestrianised area, past properly managed and clearly indicated traffic lights, through a leafy mature park, and we get a direct view of the sea from Beach Road. They arrive happy and ready for school. The proposed alternative, which is to walk past offices and through the entrails of empty town shops, stagnant traffic, and into an unfamiliar, fenced-off world, is not inspiring. It takes me back to being 5 years old, playing in my pants and vest in St Mary's Catholic School in Croydon in the 1980s, with a passing public behind the railings. This dreadful walk to school would make me want to put my children inside a car rather than walk or cycle, and there is no designated cycleway to the proposed location. Are there any other reports for this move than the October 2022 reports submitted to the Government of Jersey by the IBI Group, forwarded by Deputy Ina Gardner? The aforementioned report does not support the readiness for a school to be built at all. It relies on an extension to Plateau A school and shrinks the collective nursery intake from 40 to 60. It was difficult for us to get our firstborn into St Luke's nursery. Those shrinking numbers would have made it impossible. As I have said, St Luke's is not perfect. Their play area would be larger if the staff were not parking on the traditional play area. Is it possible for you to resolve that issue by finding an alternative parking area or a park and ride solution for staff? There is an expectation for students to make a green option their travel to school. What percentage of staff take that green option? And what expectation is there on staff of education to make greener travel choices? Our walkway from the Blue Gate into the school area has been reduced further in the last couple of years. Children are resilient, but they have breaking points. This school move is devoid of consideration of the overall mental and physical well-being of 2 children. If you were to be responsible for obliterating their friendship groups, which has been rooted in the community and locality around St Luke's, it would break them. Yours sincerely, Tracy. Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy. Conor St John.
Thank you, sir. So it's perfectly legitimate to argue that the size of the Millennium Town Park should increase to include the former Jersey Gas site. We absolutely need more green space in St Helier. I don't think anyone would question that. And extending the town park is one way of providing that additional green space. It is even more legitimate when that request comes from the Constable of St Helier, who is consistent on his wish to see the Millennium Park extended, whether he's been inside government or outside government, which gives him credibility. So my remarks today, sir, are no criticism of the Constable of St Helier, whom I respect and enjoy working with. I do have to be clear, though, sir, that it is not a proposition that I can support. It has been the policy of successive governments to build a new town primary school on the former Gas Place site, and I was so heartened to hear the former Chief Minister and the former Environment Minister speak so positively about this. The rationale behind the policy remains unchanged. We desperately need a new primary school in town, one that is fit for purpose in the modern age and does justice to children in St Helier and St Saviour, to their teachers and their parents. Now is the time to move forward with the action and delivery instead of prevaricating once again. Sir, I have visited St Luke's School a number of times since I've become Minister, both to look inside and outside, and to show others that excellent School Street, which has been a great success. There is one point, sir, I do agree with Deputy Warren, and that is, it still irritates me that in a school with such limited space, we use up some potential playground space for parking, but that's a matter for another day and a matter that I think we can still address. Fundamentally, though, St Luke's is not a school which is suitable for educating our children in 2025. Its footprint is too small, and it doesn't have enough outside space. Our children deserve better, their parents deserve better, and our staff, their teachers, deserve better. If I compare St Luke's to other primary schools, especially those in the country, it's unfavourable and frankly an unacceptable comparison. I recognise that the staff work wonders in all of our town schools with the space they have, and they do their best and they do very well, but we should not continually be asking them to pour pints into quart pots. We heard a very romantic vision, sir, from Deputy Ozoff about what T.B. Davis would have thought, sir. Sir, if we look at St Martin's and see what's been achieved in that community where the school has closed and a new facility provided, it is fantastic to see the art of the possible, sir. So if you asked me about my old school, sir, you wouldn't have to pay to demolish it. I would do it for free, sir. Sir, Springfield is another school that I visited as recently as Friday. Obviously, I've followed the Constable of St Helier and Deputy War there, sir. So I'm pleased to report that the problem with the ceiling and the roof is due to be repaired next week during half term, and this has been an ongoing problem where we've invested significant money over many years. So during my visit, I remember seeing a tent which served as a breakout area if a child needed a moment to reset themselves. And this tent was in the middle of a corridor between lockers and just outside the toilet area. I don't question the need for it to be there, sir. A breakout area like this is needed far too often in the school environments. But we need school buildings in 2025 and beyond that can provide that space as part of their design, not as an afterthought in a corridor. So I should say, sir, that I spent a number of years working in a private school locally, sir, so I'm very aware of the health and safety issues of schools, particularly in old buildings, and the challenges. Outside space, sir, is again limited with very little, if any, green space. It doesn't matter what colour you paint the school, it will not get bigger. You will not provide additional space, sir. The space is the space. And I'm sorry to tell Deputy War and others that a coat of paint and a refurbishment is not going to cut the mustard. Sir, La Passerelle. I suppose at least Springfield and St Luke's are in permanent buildings at present. My most recent visit to La Passerelle was a visit to a collection of porter cabins latched onto the Highlands campus. We don't even begin to apply the area guidelines for primary schools here. But again, sir, the staff are being too applauded. In the comments paper, you see that the pupil numbers have risen from 5 to 25. On another visit that I made last week, the head teacher was telling me that he had pupils who should be at La Passerelle, but there's no capacity for them. So, inappropriate buildings is really important. It's not just about pupil numbers. It's easy to point at the demographics and think that a falling birth rate means less need for school places and less need for a new school. Would we really be investing so much in childcare, sir, if we didn't want to see the birth rate increase? Of course we wouldn't, sir. And not only are pupil numbers not wholly dependent on the birth rate, but fundamentally schools such as Springfield, St Luke's and La Passerelle are inappropriately designed and just don't have enough modern space to meet modern educational needs. Pupil numbers are not going to fall by so many that suddenly these buildings become fit for purpose. We've reached the point today where the workarounds are at their limits. Their footprints are not sufficient and the design is wrong. The only viable option is to move to a more suitable site. Such sites are not available in abundance in Jersey, but we obviously have a balance to strike between the need for a proper education provision and other societal needs for people in St Helier, including green space and community space. I would be open to alternative sites for a new primary school, but right now I can't see a viable option. Lamont Street has just been mentioned, sir. I looked at Lamont Street as a possible area for some of the Highlands campus, sir, because they have problems there. Sir, I don't know whether to laugh or cry. If the aim was to find one of the most unsuitable buildings in the island for a new primary school, it might have made sense. I challenge members to find one educational professional who would even contemplate turning Lamont Street into a primary school in the 21st century. Seriously, it's just not serious. So if I had a 5-storey building empty, sir, I'd be looking for anybody to fill that, sir. I'm not sure that would meet the criteria needed. So we talk about delivery, and we need to stop talking about delivery and actually doing it. Sir, I've long accepted, especially in this job, that everyone has got a view on property, and property is a highly politicised area. We are frequently criticised for our failure to deliver. But if you join some of the proposals being made here together, then we will delay a school at Gas Place, we'll delay the sale of Lamont Street, and at the end we'll still have 2 schools that aren't fit for purpose, without a suitable replacement and without selling one of our disused properties. That doesn't strike me as optimal for delivery. In terms of access, sir, I have far more confidence than my Assistant Minister. We are making progress, albeit not as fast as we want. We do have a joint working group that involves government and the parish of St Helier and Cycle for Jersey, helping us to make progress. So before I close, I would like to talk about St Helier because the Constable is absolutely right to be looking to enhance the public realm in St Helier. My support for a school at Gas Place is therefore contingent on Springfield then being converted into a park. And what a beautiful space that could be. I also support the need to create more open space at the Bar Centre. Further to that, sir, we need to invest more all across St Helier. We've invested approximately £300,000 this year on play equipment at Millennium Park, and next year we have a plan to improve the ballpark, working with a partner. So that's why I've stood so robustly behind our plans on Broad Street. It's sometimes felt quite lonely, but it's been the policy of the last 3 governments, and it supports the retail and the visitor strategies, sir, and that's why I'm happy to stand up and be counted. As I keep saying, what we've seen at Newcut and on Halkett Street and what we're going to see in Broad Street should only be the beginning of our investment in St Helier at parish and island level. We need town to feel fresher, cleaner and greener. That means investing in Jersey, the product. And if we do this properly, then what we're seeing at the moment will just be the start. That's what our competitors are doing, sir, and that's what we need to make sure we're keeping pace. So I don't challenge the Constable's aim to create more green space in St Helier, but I think we can do this across town and not only in one location. There's unquestionably a balance to strike. I don't believe that anyone here is saying that the option to build a school instead of extending the park is an absolute no-brainer. We would like to do both. But at the moment, I can't see a viable alternative to allow both. Unlike some, I am convinced by the arguments of our teachers and educational professionals that a new primary school is essential, and I think the Gas Place site is the optimal location. In the interests of delivery and averting further delay, I'll be voting against the proposition. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Conrad. Deputy Joan.
Thank you, sir. And I wasn't planning on speaking, as I really wanted to listen to the debates, as we have a split in a way with the Connotab and one of the deputies of St Helier, with I assume some other deputies on the other side of this debate, and of course this is about St Helier, and really I wanted to hear from those who represent residents in St Helier what they feel about it. So I wanted to hear what's going on, but of course it is a really difficult decision, as everyone has made, because it really shouldn't be pocketed between a school on one side and a park on the other, and we should really be thinking of both. But I have been listening and hearing the arguments that especially the Minister of Infrastructure has just made about the need to get on with it. We've heard this consecutive governments, and I take that on board. But I just wanted to raise this, and it was a shame I couldn't do this before the Minister of Infrastructure spoke, but maybe someone else from another minister from the council or member of the council of ministers would be able to speak to this around the idea of the pocket parks, because I noticed that the Le Bar Centre, quite a substantial amount of it is listed, so it won't be necessarily be able to be made into a green space. And I was wondering if there had been discussions about what that kind of green space pocket park could look like in that space, because it's quite a large part of that Le Bar Centre is now listed. Yes, the gardens and the wall garden is listed, but also quite a bit of the buildings as well. And if these buildings are then to be utilised effectively, what would that mean? Would that mean that the car park needs to stay? Because depending on what the facility is that would be there, would potentially need to have the car park. And suddenly you're restricting this park into even smaller pocket parks. So I just wanted to raise that with members, that if we're thinking that a pocket park means, for example, in those two places that we're hearing, that means that's completely green space, that the buildings that are there now will be completely demolished, and there will be availability for green and for biodiversity, even trees, and for residents to be utilising that space, especially on Le Bar Centre. Quite a bit of that space will still be, as a grade 3 listed building, will still have to be there, and to be able to utilise our buildings in St Helier as well, we would need to potentially have access to that, and that could restrict that green space. So it'd be really good. I would really appreciate it in helping me in this decision further to hear from council ministers if they've had that discussion, not just about where a school is, but where that other area needed, where we're hearing about pocket parks, what that pocket park would look like if we're saying it's on Le Bar Centre, what that actually could look like, how much space are we actually talking about, because of the situation and restrictions that are on it now. Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy. Deputy Mezek.
Thank you, sir. In my speech, I'm going to quote both Winston Churchill and Karl Marx. So there will be something in it for everyone. And sir, the thoughts of Winston Churchill actually came into my head whilst listening to the speech from Deputy War. No, seriously, sir, I'll explain why. Winston Churchill, sir, was a Conservative MP who defected to the Liberals and then a time later defected back to the Conservatives. And he said of himself at the time, he quipped, "Anyone can rat, but it takes a special kind of ingenuity to re-rat." And sir, listening to the speech from Deputy War, I did not see the ingenuity of a great statesman, but I heard him describing his journey sounding as a man who walks around with a compass that never points north. Sir, he has managed to take the wrong position at the wrong time on almost every step of this journey, to the point, sir, where as a fellow St Helier South deputy, I'm afraid I can't apologise for saying that I think he is letting his constituents down by the approach that he has taken on this. But segueing nicely from the Winston Churchill quote to the Karl Marx quote, Marx said that history repeats itself first as a tragedy and then as a farce. And that occurred to me, sir, listening to the excellent speech from Deputy Moore, who spoke about other infrastructure projects that we have looked at, where our systems and our politics has utterly failed the people we have represented, not just the hospital, sir, but Fort Regent as well. How many tens of millions of pounds have we wasted chasing our own tails, getting just almost to that finish line before deciding we've got to stop, head back and relook at everything all over again, when a substantial amount of work has already been done on this project, that we can move forward on it and deliver something excellent for the people who we represent. Sir, I obviously deeply respect those who have been in touch with us about this, and I do not blame anybody who is tantalised at the thought of an extended Millennium Park. Sir, I live right next to the Millennium Park. I'm in there pretty much every day. I absolutely love it, and I absolutely see its value, and I'm absolutely I'm so pleased to be associated with a member like Deputy Southern, who worked so hard to acquire the funding to get it built in the first place. But sir, one of the ways that you show respect to your electorate and to the people you represent, it's by being honest with them. And in politics, sir, that means being honest with them by telling them up front that politics is filled with dilemmas. We have to make choices, we have to make compromises, and those will often be based on things like what you can afford, what capacity you've got to actually deliver something, timelines. And so we have to give and take often on subjects. And when I ran for election alongside my colleagues in 2022, we were honest with our voters by saying to them that there is a dilemma here, where we said to them, we would love to see the Millennium Park extended, and if a viable proposal to do that is put on the table, you can be assured of that. But in the absence of such a proposal, the next best thing is to build the school that the children of St Helier deserve on that site, and the other green space that will arise as a result of it. And we won the election on that basis. It is cheap politics to just promise people whatever you think they want to hear and then have no regard for it whatsoever when you do get elected. And it's one of the things that I think undermines faith in the democratic process. And so after the election, we discovered, and we had no idea about this before the election, and maybe our manifesto would have looked different if we had known this, but we discovered that a site right next to the gasworks had a owner of it who was seeking to get rid of it. And that's why Deputy Coles very ably brought that amendment to the budget at the time to say we need to look at this because there is a viable alternative site that could enable us to get the best of both worlds. That amendment lost, only very narrowly. I don't accept Deputy War's excuse on collective responsibility on this, sir, because ministerial codes of conduct do say that if you have a staunch position in your manifesto that is well known and held, you can deviate from the government position on it. This government has members who frequently do it. I've done it from time to time myself. But that debate was had and it was lost. And in that moment, it became the standing position of the government and the Assembly that we would move forward with a positive vision to create a new school on the gasworks site and green space in places nearby. Actually, sir, an amount of green space that in total is more than what you would get with a pure extension to the park. And so our politics now must get behind that so that we learn those mistakes from history and we don't turn tragedy into farce. And we deliver this project as efficiently and capably as we can in the interests of the children of St Helier. Like other members of this Assembly, I've been a regular visitor to the schools whose children fall in my in the catchment area of my constituency. My constituency actually doesn't have any primary schools in it, they're just about over the border. But I've been to St Luke's, I've been to Springfield, I've been to Rouge Bouillon. They are all absolutely amazing schools run by incredibly dedicated and professional staff with an amazing community of children there who it's wonderful, wonderful to see thrive as best as they can given the adversity that they have put against them because of the conditions of their buildings. And when I have in the past visited schools in the country parishes, I have also been in awe at how brilliant they are and the amazing work that goes on there and the often excellent green space and play space they have that the children of my constituency don't have. So St Luke's School has outside play space that is only just over a third of what the recommended outside play space is. And these dream alternatives that are put to us ultimately don't resolve that. You know, for those who are adamant that they want to extend the park, like great, that's all well and good, but what's the solution for the school? And we have put to us everything from just the naive to the laughably impractical, as the infrastructure minister pointed out, this idea of using the Lamott Street site, which is just not real world stuff. But sir, if you were looking at refurbishing Springfield School, there's only two ways you could make that work. One is to keep sending children there whilst you refurbish it, in which case you're sending children to learn in an active building site for years. That is absolutely unacceptable thing to send children and the way that would affect their education and everything else. Also, you temporarily close the school and you send those children to out-of-town schools dotted around the place wherever there happens to be capacity. That will be bad for their education. It will be bad for the congestion of our roads, an issue that people in my community obviously care very deeply about. And even if you were prepared to do either of those things, when it came to the end of it, you would still have school buildings that fell beneath minimum standards because of the way the sites lie. You simply can't provide more open play space on the footprints of those sites. It is impossible to do. And so that is why we cannot let the Constable of St Helier get away without saying what the alternative actually is. Is it the case that he would be happy for the children of town to continue going to schools where they have a provision of outside play space that in at least one instance is almost a third of what kids in the countryside would get? I suspect his answer to that will be no, and I would agree with that, but he has a responsibility to say what the alternative is, because that's the dilemma of politics. You have to be clear about what the trade-offs are. And so in the aftermath of Deputy Coles's amendment on this, when it narrowly was defeated, I had a conversation with the Constable of St Helier at the time to say, look, if you want to give that a second go because of your manifesto, come and talk to us, because Reform Jersey's got 8 St Helier deputies who would be all ears to any proposed solution. And I said to him, I remember this very clearly, saying to him, if you want to do a proposition, come and talk to us about it, because if you're going to go ahead with something that's got a few problematic words, we can deal with that before you lodge it, and you can advance with our support behind it, rather than things getting messy with amendments or us having to vote against it. And I never got the phone call, sir. Never happened until this proposition is lodged. And it is lodged, so with the support outside the Assembly of those who see it as a means for stopping the school, not reviewing it. I spoke to some in the Royal Square at lunchtime, and it's absolutely clear that the review for some people is a distraction. It is just a way of pulling the brakes and stopping this altogether so you can get an extended town park. There is no conclusion that a review could reach that would change their minds on it. And this proposition doesn't adumbrate what that alternative would look like. And so, sir, as a St Helier resident, a St Helier representative, a person who lives right next to the Millennium Park and who absolutely loves it and wants to see more green space there, I simply can't justify and look in the eyes of my constituents and say to them that when push comes to shove, I would want to get less overall green space and worse school facilities at the end of it, when the plan on the table right now is for even more green space, okay, spread about rather than purely on one site, but that has its advantages too, because you can design different parks for different purposes. There might be a park that's better for sitting in the shade and reading a book versus one that is throwing a ball with a dog, etc., and then that can meet different people's desires there. And provide a new town primary school. That not much talk has been made about La Passerelle as well. That's a key part of this, is relocating La Passerelle into that. That's absolutely desperately needed too. And know that I can live among my community, knowing that kids are going to the best school facilities possible, getting the best educational opportunities possible with facilities that enable that. And when they're outside of school, they'll have even more green space to choose among themselves on what they can attend. Answer, this government, I'm surprised this is controversial, but this government, after lots of talk for years, including in the previous term of office, is now actually delivering that youth centre on the Ann Street Brewery site. We're actually in the process now of going ahead with it after years of talking about it. So Sarah, I feel that I can look my constituents in the eye and say this is the right decision to make. I'm absolutely sure, and I experience this all the time already when I speak to those who want to talk to me about these issues, that when you have a reasonable discussion with them, you can bring people along with you and sometimes even change their minds when the dilemma of politics is actually put to them and people understand that you do have to make these hard choices. And so in the absence of a proper, realistic alternative put to us by the Constable of St Helier, this proposition risks creating another farce where we simply run round in circles, chasing our tail, wasting millions, tens of millions, or whatever it ends up being, to not do something that we already have enough evidence of right at this moment is a good option for our community. And so I urge members to oppose the proposition.
Thank you, Deputy. Conor St Peter.
Thank you, sir. And I had written a speech for this, but unfortunately it's sitting on my desk in the parish hall, which probably isn't the best place for it. So I've written some notes, which hopefully I'll be able to read. First, I wouldn't criticise the Constable of St Helier for his enthusiastic support for a town park, but not on the gasworks site at the expense of the school that our children deserve. And our children do deserve the best school. These children are our future, and we shouldn't forget that. Unfortunately, he hasn't, and the parish hasn't shown the same enthusiasm for a youth facility. And I have touched on this a number of times before. In the vast number of parishes, and there are one or two exceptions, though the youth facilities and the buildings have been built by the parishes, often with a loan from the government, but that loan has had to be repaid. We haven't seen that from St Helier. I haven't seen that they are not making any contribution towards the St Helier Youth Facility, and that's rather sad, actually, that they don't consider that their children are worth investing in. As you know, as Children's Minister, I see that a failure on behalf of the parish. These are their future ratepayers, their future parishioners, and yet they're not putting the same financial contribution in that other parts of the island are. The youth centre will, of course, look after hundreds of children, and during the time we looked at it, we looked at 11 sites, including the gasworks showroom stroke offices, which were found not to be suitable. So I'm not quite sure why they have been brought back into the equation. They were looked at along with the other 11 sites. They were found to be unsuitable. Well, what does the new facility offer these children? It has an all-weather pitch on the top of the building, a dance studio, boxing, a climbing wall, and numerous other facilities that will benefit the fitness and health of our young people. We are looking, it might not be a park, but we are certainly looking after the well-being of the young people in that area. And I would say that possibly to a greater extent than the park would. Of course, everything I've said relates as Children's Minister to the youth facility, and I don't really intend touching on the school because I'm not the Education Minister, not best placed to speak about that. But I would emphasise that it is the intention that the school facilities will be available outside of school hours, and that's very important because once again, it will not only be offering those facilities to the children who are at the school, but to schools who aren't there and to some adults as well. And again, it will be looking after their well-being. So please, I ask all of you, do not support this proposition. Thank you.
Sir,
yes.
Could I have a point of clarification? We've just had two ministers talking and none of them have addressed the issue that I raised about the discussion about the listed building in Pocket Parks.
Will you accept point of clarification from the Deputy?
Yes.
Yes. What's the point you want to raise from the Minister?
That there has been a point that the Pocket Park at the Bar Centre, and I was asking about clarification about the grade 3 listed building.
Can you deal with that, Minister, or not?
Sir, if I may, that is not a point of clarification, because the point of clarification is a clarification of the speech made by the member.
That's correct, yes, it's not a point of clarification. Thank you, Deputy Morrell. Does any other member speak on this proposition? Yes, Deputy Morrell.
Whilst I'm at it, sir.
Yes, you can deal with that point, perhaps.
Thank you. And with regard to Deputy Jean's question, I can't answer it. I'm afraid I don't have the information to do that. But, sir, with regard to the proposition before us, one of my biggest concerns as Economic Development Minister and as a States member in general is that Jersey has a commitment problem. And that commitment problem is genuinely endangering our future prosperity. We find it very hard to say yes and stick to the yes and see whatever development or change that needs to be made being made. We heard in earlier speeches things such as the hospital, which is the most obvious one, but there are, Deputy Mezek mentioned Fort Regent, that is another one. We are driving away investment in this island because we are unable to make a decision and stick to that decision. And this, as I believe Deputy Ward in his opening speech said, is a proposition that has gone through, I think Deputy Ward said, 4 different councils and ministers. And it is astounding to me that after that many years and that many confirmations of this being the right project for the island, that we are still here trying to, in this case, the Council of Ministers is trying to keep the course so that we can make the commitment to ensure that this school does get built. There will be opportunities for those facilities which are left behind to either become parks or pocket parks to be used as youth centres. I understand, for instance, that St Luke's is an important part of that. St Luke's School is currently today an important part of that community. That building can still be an important part of that community. Doesn't mean that the building has to disappear. Doesn't mean that the building has to be closed down to use. It can still be used in different ways as a really important part of that community, as a community centre in that community, for instance. But if as a States Assembly, we today decide to agree with the Constable's proposition, we will be sending yet another message to anyone looking to invest in this island, whether that's through property and construction or whether it's through any other form of business, that Jersey cannot stick to decisions that are made. This is an incredibly dangerous place for Jersey to be. And I will continue to say this because it is something that this Assembly needs to understand. And as we come towards an election, I hope that any new members, and I will, whether I'm re-elected or not, I will speak to new members to make sure that they understand the importance of us making decisions and sticking to those decisions. It is not something, this constant double guessing, this constant attempt to, if I'm being kind, say, reaching for perfect plans when actually a good plan is what we need, because perfection is never available. But that's the polite way of saying it, sir. It is something that we must stop doing. Because my concern is, and I think Deputy Mezek hit the nail on the head, if we were to agree with the Constable's proposition today, very little would happen for years. We would have schools that are not sufficient in their current size, in their current scale, in their current maintenance standards, would continue as schools. We would have an area of the Gas Place, which remains with a building on it, isn't a park, isn't a school, isn't anything, is just closed to the public, is lost for years to come. That's what Jersey is in such danger of doing to itself. Or more to the point, this assembly is in danger of doing to this island. Committing to something does mean, and I learned this through marriage, committing to something does mean that you can end up having an absolutely brilliant time afterwards, as scary as that commitment may be. But we've got to start understanding that. You can achieve great things once you make a commitment. But if you don't make a commitment, then you can achieve nothing at all. And Jersey is in real danger of achieving nothing at all time and time and time again, because somebody else always has an amazing trying to say the paradise, sir, but it's not paradise, paradisiacal, I think is the word I'm reaching for. Attempt to create some sort of paradise that will never happen. So, sir, I urge members to not just think of this school and this site, but also think about what the message is being sent to the wider community, particularly those who may wish to invest in this island in all sorts of different ways. But if we say no to this now, we are yet again changing the minds of this island. We are yet again stopping progress taking place. We are yet again stopping investment taking place. And we are yet again sending a message that Jersey does not want to move forward. And that is an unbelievably dangerous place for an island that has significant challenges ahead. A very dangerous place for this island to be. So please, sir, I urge members to reject the proposition.
Thank you, Deputy. Does anyone wish to speak on this proposition? I call upon the Connotab to reply. Connotab.
Thank you, sir. I'm going to struggle to do this in 9 minutes, and I hope members will bear with me, because I will go beyond 5:30, but not much beyond it, but a bit. So I'm not going to comment on everyone who spoke. That would perhaps take too long. I'm going to pick out a few themes that have come up during the debate and answer a few questions that have been raised. I think I'll begin with what I was proposing to call the hospital fallacy, or the new hospital fallacy, though after the last speaker I'm tempted to call it the marriage fallacy. What happens if you marry the wrong person? That of course is not in any sense supposed to be a personal remark either to the good deputy or in any reflexive way. But the hospital fallacy was begun by members early in the debate, and it really had its peroration with Deputy Morell. And if I could just explain it, the hospital fallacies could be summarised as just get on with it. People are sick and tired of the states changing their minds. It'll get more expensive. We had a wonderful moment in the debate when I was held responsible for costing the island, I think it was £600 million for fighting to protect People's Park from the imposition of a hospital on it. The reason this is a fallacy, the reason this argument is a fallacy, is because if we end up, for example, repairing existing schools, instead of spending tens of millions of pounds on a new building, we will have saved money. We won't have wasted it. I don't see that my request for reconsideration is going to cost money. To go back to the first speaker, the Minister, didn't quite blame me for the delay in the project, which is probably just as well, because I think that will be hard to prove in any objective way. But he did say the school, and I quote, could have been open this summer. Well, I really don't see how that could be possible unless he and the previous Minister of Education had actually put plans in and asked for planning permission, and probably also got a little extra money from the budget. So I don't accept any fault for delay in that respect. And as I say, sir, I think it's a fallacy to suggest that having a reconsideration of whether we need to spend all this money on a new school is going to raise the price. I don't think it is. So I thank the Minister for his comments. He managed to remain pretty, he managed to keep it fairly high level. He didn't go low, as a couple of members did. I'm grateful to Deputy Ferry, who was the first speaker to talk about the youth centre, and he referred to the fact that the Honorary Police would have had to relocate if the youth centre had gone into Nelson Street car park. And I'm grateful that he didn't upbraid anyone for that. Of course, we value our Honorary Police far too much. And he's confident the youth centre is going to work, as are other speakers, and I hope he's right, because it clearly is going to be built. A few members were surprised that I and Deputy Wall, for example, think that the Jersey Gas showroom could have a potential reuse. Now, obviously, I want a bigger park, and if the new youth centre is going to work, and if we can afford it, with its rising costs, then I'll be delighted to see the back of the Jersey Gas showroom, because then the park will be that much bigger. But of course, even if we left the showroom in place, there is an awful lot of open space around it, because I've walked around it. And that's why I was willing to compromise with my own view that we just need to make the park bigger. Deputy Joseph, with his long experience of the States, pointed out quite rightly that there are constantly shifting goalposts when we talk about our schools. For most of the time he was in the government, it was all about Rouge Bouillon. That was the one that had to be replaced. And relatively recently, new schools have come onto the list. Rouge Bouillon seems to have dropped off the list. I know Le Passerelle has been mentioned recently, but Le Passerelle could be fixed tomorrow if the Minister wanted to. There is space to do it. There are a number of schools where you could co-locate Le Passerelle. So to say that the needs of Le Passerelle is one of the things that's driving that high square metre requirement is a fallacy, I'm afraid. And I've already suggested, having been round the schools, that I think Springfield has a lot to commend it. You could even have more external space at Springfield. And when I was walking around the playground, I asked, what are these sheds for? Why is that bit of the playground being cordoned off? Well, there's a house falling down next door. Why don't we buy the house next door? Why don't we knock the sheds down and increase the open space in Springfield? But the arguments from the Education Department have shifted, and that is factual. They've shifted over the past 3 decades. And they're now asking us to replace St. Luke's, which presumably could have gone in the other direction. It could have moved east towards Plat Douay School, which they are planning to extend. So Deputy Mesic, in his speech, challenged me to find an alternative site. Sir, the Education Department themselves have been all over the place in talking about which school they want to replace. It's not my job to say where we could put it, because if I do, I will be shouted down. But clearly, the Lamott Street site could be demolished and cleared, and it wouldn't be as big as Dauvergne School, but nothing is going to be as big as Dauvergne School in the town centre. Deputy Tadier rightly singled out Deputy Southern's role in the creation of the first town park. I'm still grateful to Deputy Southern for that. But as I say, he talked about Le Passerelle, and he said it has to be replaced in this new school by Grand Marché, with all the traffic and all the problems that a town centre location will have. In fact, it may escape notice, but the senior school, our special needs school, is being replaced at the moment on site. So where does that leave us? I was grateful to Deputy Balash for his comments. Things have changed, as he said. The financial situation is precarious. Demographic changes he was specific about. And he said quite rightly, this is a once-in-a-century opportunity to create a real park. We need to be absolutely sure before abandoning such a project. Deputy Moore reminded us that I defended the town park, defended People's Park against the hospital site. Time will tell whether that was a good decision or not, but certainly People's Park is a well-used space, and I don't think it was ever a realistic prospect to build upon it. She was one of many members who talked somewhat glibly about the Lebas Centre, and I was grateful to Deputy Jeune for querying whether the arithmetic of the Minister was actually accurate by adding that square meterage into the green space equation, because the Lebas Centre wasn't even agreed in the Bridging Island Plan as being a green space. It's now been listed. So how can you possibly add the Lebas Centre and then come up with this wonderful figure that there'll be a third more open space, a third more green space than there would be? I'm grateful to Deputy Andrews for his support. The Constable of Grouville, I think, rightly pointed out that no one is proposing to knock St Luke's School down, and it will remain a community building, I'm sure. But the fact remains, and I think he talked about scaremongering, the fact remains that St Luke's parents are scared about the impact of losing their school, and Deputy Waugh demonstrated that in an email that he read out about it. And he also pointed out, and here I'm appealing to the St Clement deputy votes, he pointed out that the whopping rise, whopping is his word, the whopping rise in the budget for the youth centre in St Helier deprives St Clement youngsters of their improved facilities at the SCAE. There's got to be a few votes in that. I'm grateful to the Constable of St John for his words of support and also his commitment to improving the public realm of St Helier. He and I have both got the scars to prove that. Deputy Mezek began with a critique, or I should say an attack, on his fellow deputy in St Helier South, which I found unfair. The upcoming election is clearly injecting a caustic tone into our debates, especially in constituencies where members will be competing for votes. It was an interesting speech from Deputy Mezek. It was a very honest speech. He knows that many of his constituents are going to be concerned if this debate is lost. I think a number of members are a little bit rattled by some of the emails that have come onto our laptops in recent days. Very, very heartfelt concerns by long-time residents who say that it cannot be the only option to build on this site. It cannot be. You must look again. The Constable of St Peter started off by being very nice to me, and then he really went for the parliamentary phrases, sir. But yeah, he got quite personal. And he said that St Helier parishioners don't contribute to the youth centre. Well, I suppose if he'd asked us, I would have taken it to a parish assembly, and the parishioners might have said, well, what's wrong with the Jersey Gas building? Why are you going to spend £16 million down at the brewery site? They might have raised that question. But in fairness to the ratepayers, I must say that they contribute substantially every year to the cost of the youth workers in St Helier, and we have, in the past years, contributed a great deal to the development of the First Tower Youth Centre as a building and as a facility. I'm sure he would support that. So I think I've touched on most of those who spoke. I do want to thank the Friends of the Millennium Town Park Group for their work. Some members have been less than complimentary about their work. I believe it will continue. And I would say this is but an opening skirmish in the ongoing campaign for a bigger park in the heart of St Helier, and also in a campaign for better educational facilities and youth facilities for our young people. It will be, I would predict, the #1 issue in the forthcoming elections, and I'm glad that the Reform Party feels confident that they can explain their position to the electorate. I'm going to just say two more things. First of all, I'm going to ask members, whatever happened to Plan A? Whatever happened to Plan A for improving the primary school estate? You see, Gas Place was always going to be used for yet more housing. Until comparatively recently, it was going to be a housing site. And it was Andium's vision of an extended town park that freed up the space for ministers to grab and say, what can we build on it? But what were they going to do? What was education going to do? What was their Plan A? Because they must have had a Plan A for sorting out the educational estate in St Helier, but we don't know what it was. because now all we're told is that they have to put La Passerelle, St Luke's and Springfield on this site, and it's the only site that can take those schools. So I'm going to conclude by going back many years to the debate. It was a very close debate, as we were reminded, on whether to spend £10 million on a budget amendment to create the long-awaited preferred Millennium Project of the island. And as members will remember, Senator Maclean, Finance Minister, Treasury Minister, former St Helier No. 2 Deputy, was planning to vote against the proposition. But luckily for those who love the town park, he was defeated by his green ring binder. Now I have here, sir, a green ring binder, which I thought I could pass around the chamber to Deputy Southern, because he has to vote with his party, has to vote with Reform against my proposition, but maybe he would like to leave his ring binder resting on the poor button when we come to the vote. And so I will be taking the proposition as one and ask for the appel. Thank you, sir.
That has been called for. Members are invited to return to their seats. I ask the greffier to open the voting. All members have the opportunity of casting their votes. I ask the greffier to close the voting. I can announce that the proposition has been rejected. 10 votes for and 31 votes contra.
Chair, breakdown.
Those voting for the Connotab of St Helier, St Saviour, Deputies Labby, Osoph, Balash, War, Barbara Ward, Wilson and Andrews, and online the Constable, the Deputy Dublay. Those voting contra, the Connotabs of Trinity, St Peter, St Martin, St John, St Clement, Grouville, St Juan online, St Mary, and Deputies Southern, Tadier, Morale, Lahegara, Ayer, Ward, Alves, Farnham, Moore, Mezek, Coles, Miles, Scott, Reniff, Curtis, Feltham, Binet, Jearn, Miller, Howell, Ferry, Curtis and Stevenson.
Members content to adjourn? The Assembly is adjourned until 9:30 tomorrow morning. Yeah.